Chapter 1052. He was avenging Dong Sichuan. He believed that these people had something to do with Dong Sichuan's suicide. After all, the background story of this locked room also mentioned that the death of the girl in the photo was because of the other 5 people. Moreover, as soon as they entered the locked room, there was this sentence in the recording: "What sin did you commit? Was it indifference, selfishness, or arrogance?" Helene Vivian narrowed her eyes. This wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence that the murderer chose this place to commit the crime. What's wrong? Xiao Jingtian didn't understand why Helene Vivian was suddenly so silent. Her instincts told her that this shop owner probably knew something. Helene Vivian pretended to stand up casually. "If I said that Dong Sichuan's ghost came back to seek revenge on you, what would you think?" "Seek revenge on us? Why?" Xiao Jingtian snorted and glanced to the side. Her reaction was indescribably strange. It seemed like she was afraid, but also disdainful. Helene Vivian looked at her and didn't say anything else. The rest of the people also turned to look at her. Chun Feiyang's brows furrowed even more. He looked straight at Xiao Jingtian, as if he didn't want her to be so rude to Dong Sichuan. Xiao Jingtian also noticed that everyone was looking at her. She clenched her fists and tried to explain herself. "I just thought that we were so close, so why would she come to seek revenge on us? This doesn't make sense at all. Since it doesn't make sense, why did you have such a big reaction just now?" Helene Vivian's tone was very calm. "From the beginning, I felt that something was strange about you guys coming to me. It's just a dead person, so who can tell if there's really a ghost? But you guys insist that there's an evil spirit." At this point, Helene Vivian narrowed her eyes. She had believed in an old saying since she was young. If you haven't done anything wrong in your life, you won't be afraid of ghosts knocking on your door in the middle of the night. This so-called evil spirit was obviously a figment of these people's imagination. So what exactly had they done to make them so afraid? Did they think that an evil spirit was following them? Is this evil spirit Dong Sichuan? Helene Vivian looked at Xiao Jingtian. The latter did not say anything. Instead, he glanced at Qin Feiyang. "Miss Xiao, I'm asking you, is Dong Sichuan the evil ghost in your mind?" Helene Vivian was obviously not going to let go of this thread that she had pulled out. But for Xiao Jingtian to admit that she had a guilty conscience in front of these good friends, she simply couldn't do it. So what if it is her? Even if we feel that she's back, it doesn't mean that we've done anything to let her down. She ended up like this because she didn't know how to behave properly. Not only did she treat her male classmates that way, but she also treated her professors that way. In the end, someone found out about something bad. We didn't promise to help her keep it a secret, so she committed suicide. How can we be blamed for that? But her soul just won't let us go. Chun Feiyang pulled the girl over with a bang. "Who are you calling immoral? That's enough. Stop arguing." Xiao Jingtian stood in front of the two of them and pulled Chun Feiyang's hand away. She lowered her head and laughed. "Why are all of you so agitated when it comes to her?" Qin Feiyang turned his head and glanced at Xiao Jingtian as if he wanted to explain, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Qin Feiyang's attitude probably hurt the female graduate student because her eyes turned red. Xiao Jingtian raised her head and looked at Helene Vivian. "You're really smart. That's right. The evil spirit in my mind is Dong Sichuan. In fact, our relationship isn't as good as it used to be because I've never seen such a cheap person who orders men around so naturally. Not only does she chase after men, but she also lowers the standards of us girls as a whole. So you don't like me either?" Helene Vivian chuckled. "Because I order my assistant around too." Xiao Jingtian was stunned for a moment before she said, "Yes. Very good. I think I understand now." Helene Vivian didn't continue asking. Instead, she shone the flashlight at the secret door on the ceiling. Is that door the second to last level? The place where Zhang Heng died. She needed more clues. Before she found these clues, she wouldn't tell these people what she had already deduced. Obviously, these clues were hidden in the secret room. Yes. Xiao Jingtian was stunned by Helene Vivian's sudden change of topic. There's indeed a problem there. Helene Vivian raised the key she had taken from the second level. What does this key open? Xiao Jingtian paused for a moment, then raised her hand and pointed to another room. Helly and Vivian didn't hesitate and immediately opened the door with the key. As soon as she opened the door, she saw a line of eye-catching words written in red on the wall. When a person has nowhere to go, the first thing they think of is committing a crime. However, it's not shameful. It's nothing more than cutting off all of their escape routes. In addition to this line of words, there was also an old photo in the small room. It was a photo of the dead girl and two other girls. In the photo, they were all smiling happily, and there was nothing unusual about them. Helly and Vivian lowered her head and seemed to be lost in thought. She couldn't get an answer. When you guys passed this level back then, who came up with the idea? It was Fei Yong. Xiao Jingtian walked over and said, at that time, he asked all of us to stand in and try closing the door. There was immediately movement in the room from before, but even now, we still don't understand why he wanted to close the door. Helly and Vivian shone the flashlight on the wall. Because of the hint in this sentence, cutting off all of one's escape routes is very likely to get someone to close the door. After all, there is only one escape route here. You thought of it just now, Chen Feiyan suddenly said. Why are you asking who came up with the idea? Helly and Vivian reached out and pulled the door open. I'll tell everyone the answer at the end. Now, come in and close the door first. No one wanted to stay here any longer. If they could get out of these levels as soon as possible, of course, everyone was willing to do so, except for the murderer. After Helly and Vivian finished speaking, no one objected. The wooden door was closed, and even His Highness and Helly and Vivian were locked in a small room. After less than 3 seconds, there was a bang, and there was movement outside the room. Helly and Vivian opened the door and swept the flashlight again. An unknown object popped out from the ceiling. Chapter 1053. In the secret room, the woman's voice sounded again. It seems that until now, you still don't know what crime you've committed. It doesn't matter. I'll give you one last chance. This is the only way to get out of here. As long as you find the answer, I'll forgive you. Helly and Vivian listened carefully to the recording. The word forgive was very important. This further proved that her train of thought was correct. She strode towards the prop that popped out from the ceiling and reached out to straighten it. It was a simple staircase made of springs, but it was sturdy enough. It was obvious that they had to climb up to reach the next level. Let's go up, Helly and Vivian said again. However, at this time, the timid female graduate student shook her head desperately. I don't want to go. It's too scary. You don't understand at all. The deeper we go, the scarier it gets. I really don't want to experience that fear again. Can I wait for you here? Helly and Vivian looked back at her. Are you sure you want to wait here? Haven't you noticed? What? The female graduate student didn't understand why Helly and Vivian was asking her this. Helly and Vivian shone the flashlight at the door they came from. This is a 3-lock design. When this staircase pops out, the door we came from will automatically lock. This lock is locked from the inside of the secret room. Unless we unlock all the mechanisms, we won't be able to get out. Aren't you afraid of waiting here? Of course, the female graduate student was afraid. She felt that something would pop out of this secret room with every step she took. Furthermore, there was the matter with Dong Sikhan. She felt that that woman had returned and wanted to kill all of them. Okay, let's climb up according to the order we came in. Helly and Vivian glanced at the female graduate student again. I'll take Zhang Heng's place and bring up the rear. Let's go. No matter how scared the female graduate student was, she had no choice but to follow him. This was because her escape route had been cut off. No one knew what was in the other room. If she stayed here alone, what would happen? Just thinking about it made her feel scared. After the few of them went up, they arrived at a dark tunnel. The tunnel looked like a scene from the movie Resident Evil, when danger was chasing after them outside. Those who survived had to escape through the tunnel as soon as possible. No one knew what they would encounter in the tunnel. It was said that the unknown was the most terrifying, but His Highness, who was walking at the front, didn't seem to have this problem at all. A few people looked on helplessly as Bailey Jia Ju slid down into the darkness. His back was straight and handsome. His black gloves did not even touch the dust on both sides of his body. The female graduate student turned around and asked Helly and Vivian, he should be younger than us, right? Isn't he afraid? He's more daring. Helly and Vivian calmly lied. After all, if she revealed His Highness' true age, it would definitely frighten a group of people. After Beligija left, the five of them joined together to form a new pure yang array. Helly and Vivian was the last to go up, and nothing happened along the way. Sliding down the tunnel suddenly opened up, and they arrived at another room. The decoration of this room was obviously a school rooftop. Other information hadn't been revealed yet. But why would there be a school's rooftop in an old house? This made Helly and Vivian very puzzled. Could it be? Did Dong Sikhun commit suicide by jumping off the rooftop of your school? Helly and Vivian asked. The other four people were caught off guard and froze. It wasn't until Chun Feiyong answered in a deep voice that the other three people had expressions on their faces. Helly and Vivian used a flashlight to illuminate the surroundings. She jumped off the building at night, right? How did you know? Even Chun Feiyong's tough face showed surprise, let alone the other people's reactions. Helly and Vivian raised her chin. There are stars and moons on the wallpaper. It's a hint of time. But what does this have to do with Dong Sichuan's death? The female graduate student was confused. She didn't understand how Helly and Vivian could deduce that the woman jumped off the building at night just by looking at a secret room. Helly and Vivian didn't answer this question. Xiao Jingtian looked at her and asked, "Do you know something?" "I do know something, but I'll have to wait until the end." Helly and Vivian tapped her finger on the wall. "Come on, let's go to the next level. There's a 4-digit lock here. Do you still remember what day Dong Sikhun jumped off the building?" Chun Feiyong said, "April 17th, 2015. To be precise, it was the early morning of April 17th, 2015. The boy holding the walkie-talkie pushed up his glasses. After midnight that night, someone heard the sound of something falling from the rooftop. Later, the police called us in for questioning. They said that Sikhun died between 1 and 1:30 in the morning and asked us if we knew what happened." "That's right." Chun Feiyong frowned. "At the time, the police asked us a lot of questions, including whether we knew if Sikhun had suicidal tendencies. At the time, I thought it was very strange. Why would they ask us that? Later, it was confirmed that it was a suicide, but there was no reason for it. In order to suppress the impact, the school left the matter unsettled." Helly and Vivian raised her eyebrows. "So you think it's very inhumane of the school to do this? Isn't it?" Chun Feiyong sneered. Helly and Vivian's thin lips curled up. "It's indeed very inhumane. What about the other students? If it's like the police said, and someone knew in advance that Dong Sikhun had suicidal tendencies, but they didn't stop her, then don't you think they're even more inhumane? She didn't even think about jumping off the building." Chun Feiyong's words were almost resolute and decisive. Helly and Vivian's eyes flashed, and her words were very sharp. "How can you be so sure that she didn't have suicidal tendencies?" Chun Feiyong suddenly paused and continued. "I just know. Based on my understanding of her, I don't believe that she would be so open and casually choose to end her life by committing suicide. In other words, you relied on your own intuition to determine that Dong Sikhun didn't commit suicide, right?" Helly and Vivian chuckled softly and put away the flashlight. Her gaze was serious. "You're lying." Chun Feiyong's expression immediately changed. Helly and Vivian's voice was still very slow. "Everyone's intuition comes from a reason. When I asked you just now, you clearly paused, which proves that you're hiding something." Chapter 1054. "Before I unlock this lock, Mr. Chun, I want to hear what you're hiding." Helly and Vivian held the iron lock. Her previous easygoing attitude was gone, and she looked like a queen. Her aura was so strong that no one could refuse her. Chun Feiyong stood there, and his eyes started to wander. It was obvious that he was trying to avoid something. Xiao Jingtian stepped forward to smooth things over. "It's been so long, so there's no need to bring it up again. Shop owner, let's hurry up and get out of here. It's too dark here. Tingting and I are really scared. If you're afraid of Dong Sichuan's ghost, then there's no need to." Helly and Vivian turned around and looked at the other three people. Because Zhang Heng's murderer isn't an evil spirit, and Dong Sikhun hasn't come back yet. From the moment I came in, I didn't notice any ghosts here. It's just that the setting is a little scary. Xiao Jingtian's face was full of disbelief. "You're saying that we're overthinking everything, and that Zhang Heng's death was an accident, then there was obviously something else behind that word. But Xiao Jingtian didn't say anything. She swallowed her words and shook her head again. That's impossible. Of course, Zhang Heng's death wasn't an accident. Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. Someone is avenging Dong Sikan. In other words, one of the four of you is the murderer. What? Xiao Jingtian's eyes widened. The others were also shocked. Their expressions were magnified, and they looked like they were in complete disbelief. But Hellion Vivian knew very well that one of them was lying and acting. Her tone was as calm as ever. Based on what you said just now, I've basically ruled out two suspects. One is you, Miss Xiao, and the other is Miss Tingting. It's obvious that the two of you don't have a good relationship with Dong Sikan. It could even be said that you hate her. Since that's the case, you probably won't think of avenging her or anything like that. As she spoke, Hellion Vivian's gaze fell on the two boys. Chun Feiyong paused. The other boy holding the walkie-talkie also paused. Only someone who liked Dong Sikan would avenge her, because the murderer felt that Dong Sichuan's death was directly or indirectly related to all of you. Hellion Vivian continued. So, who do you think the remaining two people are? Xiao Jingtian and the timid Gua Tingting widened their eyes again. How is that possible? No, I don't believe it. Gua Tingting glanced at Chen Feiyong as she said, just because someone is dead doesn't mean that there's a murderer among us. There are so many traps in this secret room. Even if someone is going to kill someone, it should be the shop owner, right? Hellion Vivian didn't tell them that she had already investigated the shop owner. Instead, she smiled and said, "You're right. The shop owner could also be the murderer." I knew it. Gua Tingting seemed to be relieved. Hellion Vivian asked again, "If the shop owner is the murderer, what is his motive?" Gua Tingting paused because she couldn't answer at all. Hellion Vivian shifted her gaze back to Chun Feiyong. So, Mr. Chun, if you don't explain clearly what you're hiding, I'm very likely to think that you're Zhang Heng's murderer. Chen Feiyong's face turned pale. Do you think we'll believe you just because you say that? It's so dark here. How can we kill someone? Don't you think you're being a little too imaginative? This isn't an imaginative idea. Hellion Vivian smiled. As for how to kill someone, I believe we'll be able to find it in the next level. Chen Feiyong didn't back down. Perhaps your analysis makes sense, but do you know that all of us were separated from Zhang Heng? We were in another room. So how could we have gone to that room to kill him? Through the wall? Of course not. Hellion Vivian scanned the surroundings with her flashlight. All of the murders in secret rooms require the use of tools to complete the entire crime. There are so many mechanisms here, so any one of them can be modified slightly to become a murder tool. Mr. Chun, the three of you are all scientific researchers, and you just so happen to have minors in the field of mechanism disassembly and assembly, so it shouldn't be difficult for you to modify a mechanism, right? Chun Feiyong shook his head. You must have read too many novels to have such a rich imagination. I've always had a good relationship with Zhang Heng, so why would I want to kill him? If you really want to know why I'm so sure that Sikan wouldn't commit suicide, I can tell you that after we finished our questioning that day, we overheard the police's suspicions. They suspected that Sikan might not have committed suicide because there are always signs of suicide. She had clearly found an internship company and was going to report to the company tomorrow. She even happily invited us out for a meal the day before and said that she had entered a very good company. Jingtian should know about this company. It's one of the top few companies in the country, and it belongs to the Xiao Corporation. Is that true? Hellion Vivian turned her head and asked Xiao Jingtian. Xiao Jingtian's face suddenly stiffened, and an extremely complicated look quickly flashed across her eyes. Her hands that were hanging by her sides also slowly clenched. That's right. Hellion Vivian noticed her unusual reaction, and her thoughts sank. Everyone here seemed simple, but in reality, they all had their own thoughts. And when these thoughts were connected, they would form an answer. But none of them were willing to tell the real truth. You all know about this? Hellion Vivian asked again. Gua Tingting and the other boy nodded in agreement. That day when we were eating, Dong Sikan even showed off her salary to us. Gua Tingting pursed her lips mockingly. She said that she could earn 100,000 yuan a month as soon as she graduated, and that she was working in the CEO's office. She was usually very relaxed, so she told us not to be too envious. She probably wanted to show Jing Tian who was the boss. After all, Jing Tian was much better than her in research, so she wanted to compete with Jing Tian in terms of salary. That woman probably didn't expect that no matter how much money she earned, she was still working for Jing Tian's family. A graduate student who had just graduated was assigned to the CEO's office, and this graduate student's studies weren't even considered outstanding. Besides, wasn't 100,000 yuan a month a little too high? Hellion Vivian wasn't familiar with this because she had always been doing business for herself and had never worked before. She could only turn around and ask His Highness, "Jew, how much do you pay special assistant long a month?" Beligaju raised his eyes to look at her, then gently tilted his head. His black fingers pressed against his thin lips, and after rubbing them a few times, the corners of his mouth curled up into a half-smile as he gave Hellion Vivian an answer. He never seems to ask for a salary. Chapter 1055. Hellion Vivian. She shouldn't have asked His Highness this question. After all, the people who followed His Highness were all hot-blooded mythical beasts. Their loyalty could be witnessed by the sun and the moon, so they really didn't need to be paid. However, if it were me, I wouldn't arrange for a woman to be in the CEO's office. Beligaju's figure didn't change. He was still a head shorter than Hellion Vivian, but his tone was very domineering. Why? Hellion Vivian originally thought that he would talk about her ability. After all, Dong Sikhan had just graduated. Logically speaking, she wasn't suitable for that position at all. Unexpectedly, Beligaju chuckled softly. He looked at her with his deep eyes and said in a bewitching voice, "Because I'm worried that my master will be jealous." What was this feeling of being teased again? Hellion Vivian coughed lightly. Although she did care a little, His Highness probably wouldn't do something like keeping a secretary. Wait a minute. A beautiful female university student. She had no background and no real talent, yet she entered the CEO's office. This was very abnormal. Hellion Vivian didn't know if she was thinking too much. She looked in Xiao Jingtian's direction and said, "This company is your father's." "Miss Xiao, do you know how Dong Sikhan was assigned to such an important position in the CEO's office?" "I've never been familiar with the matters in Dad's company." Xiao Jingtian's expression was a little stiff, as if she didn't like to talk about this matter. Hellion Vivian saw her reaction and asked casually, "Then what about your mother? She doesn't know about this either?" "Miss Hellion." Xiao Jingtian seemed to have touched on some secret, and her reaction became particularly intense. "Why are you always asking about unimportant things like this? We invited you here to help us solve the problem. What does this have to do with my mother?" Hellion Vivian's eyes were indifferent. "It doesn't. Why are you so agitated? I just don't understand the meaning of your question." After Xiao Jingtian's breathing stabilized a little, she looked at Hellion Vivian and appeared a little fragile. "I'm sorry, I lost my composure a little. My mother doesn't know anything, so don't drag her into this." Hellion Vivian took a deep look at Xiao Jingtian. "Okay, since that's the case, I want to ask you directly. Is there some sort of shady relationship between your father and Dong Sikhan?" "What did you say?" Xiao Jingtian didn't say anything. Chun Feiyong and the other guy shouted at the same time. Hellion Vivian turned her gaze to them and smiled gently. "Very good. This is the reaction I wanted. It seems that you guys really care about Dong Sikhan. What's there to care about?" Chun Feiyong's eyes were red. "How can you insult people like that? What shameful relationship? You've been spouting nonsense since the beginning." Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. "Nonsense? Mr. Chun, let me remind you that whether or not it's nonsense is up to Miss Xiao to decide, not you." "Huh, that's impossible." That's right." Xiao Jingtian raised her head. In that instant, the hatred in her heart surpassed any fear. "That day, I went to my father's company and saw the two of them in his office with my own eyes. Haha, I've really never seen a woman as cheap as Dong Sikhan. She does like Chun Feiyong, but she likes men who can bring her benefits even more, like my father. She's such a cheap woman, yet you guys actually treat her like a princess and think that she's perfect in every way. What a joke. Are all men so stupid? Whether it's you guys or my father, all of you are the same. You're all played by her and think that she's so pure. It's really funny. Can't you see that she's so obviously vain? Chen Feiyong was shocked. He looked at the tears falling from Xiao Jingtian's eyes and seemed to want to say something. However, Xiao Jingtian didn't look at him. Instead, she turned around and held her breath for a moment. I've already said what I should say. What else does Miss Hellion want to ask? Do the police know about these things? Hellion Vivian's tone was very calm. Xiao Jingtian frowned. Yes, they asked me about these things. Okay, I understand. Hellion Vivian's gaze shifted. I just said that someone wants to avenge Dong Sikhan. He likes Dong Sikhan to the point that he's almost stubborn. Of course, I'm not sure if he knows what kind of person Dong Sikhan is, but it's obvious that he doesn't intend to just kill one person to end this matter. He first killed Zhang Heng, then continued to follow and observe you guys. This is also why you guys keep thinking that there are ghosts around. In fact, it's not that Dong Sikhan came back, but that there really is someone around you. Furthermore, he's preparing to kill the second person he thinks is unforgivable during this escape room game. At this point, Hellion Vivian paused for a moment. If I'm not wrong, Miss Xiao, the next person he wants to kill is you. That's why you feel it so strongly. Xiao Jingtian froze. That's impossible. Why is it impossible? Hellion Vivian glanced at Chen Feiyong. Do you think that the murderer won't kill you for Dong Sikhan? Xiao Jingtian's whole body trembled. Then, she laughed bitterly. No, I'm thinking too much. It's very likely that he'll kill me for Dong Sikhan. Who is he? Hellion Vivian asked directly. Xiao Jingtian didn't say anything. Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. Or you can tell me who you think the murderer is. I don't want to say. Xiao Jingtian's left hand hung down weakly, and the other hand pressed against her forehead. Hellion Wei Wei didn't continue to ask. She took a step back, which was a rare occurrence. It wasn't because of anything else, but because this girl was very similar to her in her memories. That kind of suffering. It seemed like no one would understand. The suffering of pretending that she didn't know anything in order to protect her mother when her father cheated on her. In addition, the boys she liked might even kill her for the sake of that mistress. It was probably very painful. Perhaps it was so painful that she wanted to die. However, Hellion Vivian still hadn't found conclusive evidence to prove that Chen Feiyong was the murderer, so she wouldn't make any conclusions. However, Guotingting couldn't accept such an outcome. Her eyes shook as she looked at Hellion Vivian. Her voice trembled as she said, "You're saying that he's going to kill a second person for that bitch? Since he can kill the first person in this secret room, he can kill the second." Chapter 10:56. Hellion Vivian reminded Guotingting, "Don't forget about the recording we heard when we opened the third level. It seems like you guys still don't know what crime you committed. That means he won't stop his crime, because in his heart, Dong Sichuan's death is related to all of you. He still hates all of you. That's too scary." Guotingting's whole body trembled. How could he kill a second person here? How could he kill her in front of so many people? Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. When Zhang Heng died, wasn't it in front of so many people as well? No, I still don't believe it. Guotingting bit her lip. There must be some misunderstanding. Hellion Vivian looked at her. There can't be a misunderstanding. I have a guess in my heart now, but it's not convenient to tell you guys. Let's go to the next level first. I still have something to look for. Only then can I really determine who the murderer is. Of course, I also want to warn the murderer here. Don't even think about making a move in front of me. Hellion Vivian picked up the metal lock and turned around. Be careful, or you'll lose more than you gain. The two boys had different expressions, but they looked at Hellion Vivian with the same unwillingness. Hellion Vivian chuckled, as if she didn't care at all about how they looked at her. Dong Sikhan jumped off the building on April 17th. The sign in the room symbolized the time, which meant unlocking the password to the rooftop was the date of Dong Sichuan's death, 0417. Gotcha! The door was unlocked, and a sliding wooden cabinet popped out. People entered the wooden cabinet and used their arms to support themselves against the wall to enter the next level. The wooden cabinet wasn't big, and it could only fit one person at most. In other words, they had to pass through the next level one by one. Helly and Vivian narrowed her eyes. Who was the first to enter this wooden cabinet? Me. Chen Feiyong stood up. When we first played this secret room, I was the one who took the lead. Helly and Vivian smiled. Not all of you went in, right? Yes. Only I, Zhang Heng, and Xiaodong have been inside. Chen Feiyong laughed coldly. What did that make you think? Helly and Vivian tapped the wooden cupboard with her finger. Zhang Heng was killed at this stage. Only those who have entered have the chance to kill him. So you still think one of us is the murderer? Chen Feiyong continued to sneer. Just because Sikhan is dead, we have to kill all our friends? Don't you think that's too far-fetched? Mr. Chen, Helly and Vivian interrupted Chen Feiyong. What if Dong Sikhan didn't commit suicide, but was murdered? Then wouldn't the murderer have a reason to kill in order to avenge her? Everyone was stunned by Helly and Vivian's words. Guo Tingting and Xiao Jingtian, in particular, looked at each other and saw the same expression on each other's faces. Murdered? You mean to say that someone killed Sikhan? The eyes of the boy holding the walkie-talkie shook. Helly and Vivian's voice was as calm as ever. That's right. Since the police gave you some information, it means that someone found something from this information. It's actually very simple. When the police asked you to go in for questioning, it was also because they suspected that Dong Sikhan didn't commit suicide, but was murdered. However, at that time, there was probably pressure from the school and the Xiao Corporation to bribe them with money, so the matter didn't blow up. Moreover, when someone dies at school, suicide is always less impactful than homicide. As long as the parents are appeased, it won't attract too much attention from the media. However, a homicide is different. The police will try their best not to think about that possibility. Moreover, to conclude that it was a homicide, they must have found conclusive evidence. That night, Guo Tingting, as a roommate, didn't tell the dormitory manager that her roommate didn't come back. There was a whole 6 hours between the time the victim died and the discovery of the body. No matter how much evidence there is on the rooftop, it should have been taken away by the murderer long ago. That's why the police concluded that it was a homicide. However, there must be something else in the police report that makes them suspect that it was a homicide. I don't understand. Are you saying that the murderer killed Dong Sikhan and then killed Zhang Heng? Guo Tingting's eyes were a little dazed when she said this. Helly and Vivian pressed her forehead with a headache. It was really tiring to talk to people who didn't make logical deductions. However, there was a very important secret that she had just found out. The person who killed Dong Sikhan and the person who killed Zhang Heng are not the same person. This is a case within a case. Helly and Vivian's sharp gaze swept over everyone. Guo Tingting felt a little scared. A case within a case? To put it simply, someone guessed from the police that the person who killed Dong Sikhan was among you, and that's why he hated you. He must have been looking for an opportunity to kill you, but he couldn't find the right time. It wasn't until you decided to come to this secret room that he thought of a perfect way to kill you. Furthermore, this person knows that you have a ghost in your heart. This ghost is the dead Dong Sikhan. He used this to make you live in fear and be on guard against the dangers that you imagined while planning how to kill you. To the murderer, the more afraid you are of Dong Sikhan, the more suspicious you are. During this time, he observed each and every one of you and finally confirmed that it was Zhang Heng. However, he soon realized that he had killed the wrong person because Zhang Heng wasn't the person who killed Dong Sikhan. At this point, Helly and Vivian paused. In other words, there are now two murderers hiding among you. One is the person who killed Dong Sikhan, and the other is the person who killed Zhang Heng. That's ridiculous. Chen Feiyong was the first person to growl. The other three people also looked like they had been punched. They looked at each other, and their eyes were full of wariness. Should they say that Helly and Vivian's speculation was too shocking? But where did this strange feeling come from? Helly and Vivian chuckled. Whether it's ridiculous or not, we'll be able to verify it once we enter the cabinet. However, since the murderer is so smart and is so proficient in the mechanisms here, it will definitely be dangerous for anyone to enter alone. In order to prevent anything bad from happening, as the one who accepted the deal, I will enter the cabinet first. You all wait outside. You want me to wait outside as well? Beligaju, who had been silent all this time, raised his head and looked deeply at Hellion Vivian. Those beautiful eyes made it impossible for anyone to refuse. Hellion Vivian pointed at the cabinet. Only one person can enter. Then I'll go in. You wait outside. Chapter 1057. Even in his adorable state, His Highness was still very domineering when he needed to be. His thin lips curled up devilishly. Of course, if you don't want to see a bunch of corpses when you come out, you can go in first yourself. What he meant was that he might get impatient and kill all the humans with his own hands. After all, he hadn't been very happy these past 2 days. Hellion Vivian looked at His Highness in front of her. She knew very well that he was a man of his word, so she sighed and said, "Then be careful. Pay attention to the traps around you." "Okay." Beligaju smiled again. His eyes curved in a crescent, giving off a completely different vibe from before. In some ways, His Highness was just like a child. Hellion Vivian rubbed her chin. This made her even more determined to get him drunk tonight. She really didn't understand. Wasn't he afraid? How much money did she give you to work so hard for her? Beligaju didn't even look at her. The corners of his mouth curled up as if he was mocking her. It seemed to be saying, how could humans like you possibly understand? What did that person mean to him? Yes, what did it mean? Xiao Jingtian had stopped believing in love a long time ago. Her father's actions and her boyfriend's betrayal. All of her views on relationships had been completely destroyed on that day. But why was it that when she saw these two people, she felt angry and sad, but she also hoped that these two people would be different from all the people she had seen in the past? Finally, when Beligaju decided to take the lead and walk into the cabinet, she understood. That feeling wasn't hatred, because she knew very well that this Taobao shop owner was not the same kind of person as Dong Sikhan. The way the shop owner looked at the young man was like how her mother looked at her father back then. And how many people could choose to take the risk and leave the girl they liked on the safe side in the face of life and death? So she was envious. Envious that they could be so inseparable. Swish! The wooden cabinet was pulled shut. As the wooden cabinet was pushed open, the crying sound they had heard before rang out again. That voice was extremely miserable and ear-piercing. As it echoed in one's ears, it made one's hair stand on end. In the past, they had not heard the contents clearly, but now they could hear it clearly. The recording kept saying, "Give me back my life, give me back my life." The shop owner's deduction was right. The person who killed Zhang Heng was never a ghost, but someone who wanted to avenge Dong Sikhan. Did that mean that the young man was in danger? When Xiao Jingtian regained her senses, the first thing she did was to grab the closet that she had just pushed in. Hellion Vivian looked up at her red eyes and paused for a moment. She reached out and pressed the back of her hand. "Don't cry." Even though she heard someone say this, Xiao Jingtian's tears still fell. She didn't know why she was crying. However, she had never expected that he would actually like Dong Sikhan to this extent. Was he really willing to kill for that woman, including killing her? Xiao Jingtian pressed her head against the wooden cabinet as tears fell one after another. Her fingers held onto Hellion Vivian. He'll be fine, right? Hellion Vivian knew that this girl had too many flaws and would make people dislike her. But at the same time, she also knew that this girl had a kind heart. She couldn't bear such a huge sin. "Don't worry, my assistant is invulnerable." Although Hellion Vivian said this, her eyes were fixed on the closet. It was as if as long as something happened to Beligaju, she wouldn't solve the case. She would directly find the culprit and kill him according to the old rules. Sometimes it was like this. Even if they knew that the other party was an invincible devil, even if they joined forces, they could only be beaten back by him. These human traps couldn't hurt him at all. But Hellion Vivian was still worried. "You actually like him a lot, right?" Xiao Jingtian suddenly asked in a low voice. Why did she doubt the shop owner's sincerity towards the young man before? Hellion Vivian admitted it very quickly with a smile on her face. "Of course, this man can easily make me not like myself. I'm always worried about personal gains and losses, and I even have doubts from time to time because of what other people say. I think that I'm not that important to the other party. But just now, when I thought about it carefully, it doesn't matter if he's important or not. In any case, He's very important to me. Xiao Jingtian was stunned. She had never seen such a person before. He was as tough as a tree, and his entire body seemed to emit a dazzling light. Hellion Vivian didn't waste too much time. With a twist of her wrist, an invisible current seemed to gather in her palm. The Phoenix's clear trace echoed in the small secret room before anyone could react. The cabinet was pulled back to its original position by her. At the same time, there was a click. The sound of a lock being unlocked came from the other side. A hidden secret door was pulled open heavily with the wind blowing in both directions. Bailey Jia Ju stood in the darkness. Behind him were 4 sharp steel pipes inserted into the ground, flickering with an ice-cold luster. However, he seemed to be completely fine. His tightly clasped black gloves were still wrapped around his slender hands, and the black suit on his body didn't have a single wrinkle. He looked at Hellion Vivian and smiled. Too many things popped out, so it took me a little time to solve the problem. Everyone, they were scared to death here. He actually solved the problem. It hadn't even been a minute since he entered, right? How could he solve it so quickly? Hellion Vivian was also looking at His Highness secretly. After all, just the escape room alone once again proved that His Highness seemed to be smarter than her. No matter how fast she solved the problem, it would still take her 3 to 4 minutes. This guy didn't even take a minute. Was he looking down on her IQ? What? My respected master, do you feel that your IQ has been crushed? Beligaju chuckled softly and glanced at the wardrobe beside him. Huh, do you still like to use violence to solve problems? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and retracted her hand. She decided to ignore a certain someone's words. Otherwise, she would be killed by his poisonous tongue. This is called taking a shortcut. Tell me what you encountered. Beligaju looked especially harmless when he smiled. Does encountering a lot of attacks count? But it's still quite fun. We can play this kind of game more in the future. Hellion Wei Wei had a feeling that His Highness was serious when he said that. He was actually interested in escape rooms. However, Hellion Vivian looked at the sharp steel pipes and narrowed her eyes. Zhang Heng was nailed to this room by these steel pipes, right? Chapter 1058. Yes. Xiao Jingtian finally came back to her senses and looked at Beligaju with shaky eyes. Wasn't this too amazing? There were so many steel pipes coming at him from all directions, and the room was very dark. Yet, he was actually able to solve the problem while avoiding these steel pipes. Guo Tingting also felt that this young man was a little inhuman. Where did this monster come from? He actually found this situation interesting. No matter how others looked at him, Beligaju still had a mesmerizing smile on his face. At the same time, there was an innate coldness in his eyes. Other than Hellion Vivian, it was as if he didn't care about anyone else. Hellion Vivian walked into the dark room. Because the mechanism had been triggered just now, a long-haired human head popped up from the ceiling. It always made people feel uncomfortable hanging from the ceiling like that. Other than the flashlight, there was no other light in this room, and there were dried bloodstains on the ground. This place was very much like a haunted house, and it was more eerie than anywhere else. Probably because someone had died here, Hellion Vivian could clearly feel the residual resentment in this place. The background of the room was like a female dormitory. There was also a wooden bed with bunk beds next to it. There were books on the cabinets, and each of them was used for scientific research. The moment Guo Tingting walked in, she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. That sense of familiarity was indescribable, and the only feeling she had was that it made her hair stand on end. This window is open. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes slightly as she looked at the sentence written in red handprint. Those who know but don't say it will be considered guilty. Her voice was slightly deep as she said, "From here, it's the previous level. Don't you think it's strange?" The boy holding the walkie-talkie looked in Hellion Vivian's direction and suddenly froze. "You're saying that the murderer is telling us that someone saw something on the rooftop through this window, but she didn't say anything." "That's right." Hellion Vivian glanced at him. "How'd you guess?" The boy exclaimed and then pointed at the sentence on the wall. "Those who know but do not speak are guilty." Based on what the shop owner said earlier, the murderer thinks that every one of us is guilty, and that's what I think it is. Then he scratched the back of his head. Am I wrong? Hellion Vivian chuckled. No, you're very smart. That is indeed the case. However, the murderer is not telling us. He's telling the people who saw something on the rooftop but didn't say anything. At this point, Hellion Wei Wei paused for a moment, then turned around and said to Guo Tingting, Miss Tingting, I think you should know this better than anyone else. That day, what exactly did you see through the window of your dormitory, and what happened on the rooftop? Me? Guo Tingting's eyes drifted. I don't know what you're talking about. That night, I turned off the lights and went to sleep. The dorm Annie can testify for me. Hellion Vivian looked at her. You did turn off the lights early, but it wasn't because you wanted to sleep. It was because you could see the rooftop clearly from where you were lying. Turning off the lights would allow you to see more clearly. Guo Tingting's mind was guessed correctly. Her body suddenly trembled. Why are you so sure that I saw it? This is just a small room in a secret room. How can you think of so many things? Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. Miss Tingting, haven't you noticed? The layout of this room is almost exactly the same as the dorm you live in. Guo Tingting suddenly paused. After Hellion Wei Wei's reminder, she finally realized where the source of that sense of familiarity came from. Why? Why is the layout of this secret room like this? Guo Tingting was obviously on the verge of breaking down. She was so scared that her whole body trembled. Who is it? Why are they playing us like this? Do they like that woman that much? She roared the last sentence at Chen Feiyang. She was angry and scared at the same time. Tears streamed down her face. Xiao Jingtian turned around and hugged her. Her arms tightened as she comforted her silently. Guo Tingting finally calmed down a little, but the corners of her mouth curled up into a cold smile. That's right, I did hide some things. Chen Feiyang, Zhao Xiaodong. Haven't you always thought that Dong Sikun was so beautiful and pure? I'll tell you now what I saw that day. She was holding her head high and being intimate with someone, and that person was none other than Zhang Heng. That's why I said that among all of you men, only Zhang Heng could be considered smart. At the very least, he knew that a woman like Dong Sikun would be able to climb into someone else's bed as long as he gave her some benefits. Besides, she doesn't lack men at all. Chen Feiyang, I used to like you, but I don't anymore. A man who takes a fancy to a woman like Dong Sikun isn't worthy of me, Guo Tingting, to continue pursuing him. Besides, you actually wanted to kill us for that woman. It's fine if you did it to other people, but you actually had the heart to do it to Jing Tian. Huh, you're really heartless. A man like you deserves to be played around by Dong Sikun. Are you done? Chen Feiyang clenched his fists tightly, and his expression was very ugly. Guo Tingting's neck was thick, and she still wanted to say something. However, she was interrupted by Hellion Vivian. This murderer is indeed quite stupid, but there aren't many men who aren't blind. That's why second-rate goods are only worthy of being played around by Dong Sikun. Only those who aren't played around are worthy of you. So, Miss Tingting, other than that, what else did you see? Halfway through their intimacy, they suddenly started arguing. They were probably worried that someone would hear them, so they didn't make a sound. They just pushed each other a few times. Later, the two of them moved to a place where I couldn't see them. After that, I couldn't see the two of them anymore. I think they probably made up again, and I got bored watching them. Plus, I was really sleepy that day, so I fell asleep. After Guo Tingting finished speaking, she heaved a heavy sigh of relief. Other than that, I don't have anything else to hide. In fact, there are many things about Dong Sikun that I don't want to talk about. As her roommate, I clearly saw which professor she had an affair with, and how she treated these men. But she's really something. She pretends so well in public. Should I say that women understand women better? Or should I say that these men are brainless? Chapter 1059. The two men who were named didn't have a pleasant expression on their faces. Hellion Vivian didn't care what they thought. She looked at Guo Tingting and asked, "Is that all you saw?" "Yes." Guo Tingting didn't look into Hellion Vivian's eyes when she answered. Hellion Vivian paused. "If I were you, I would choose to tell the truth at a time like this." Guo Tingting was a little restless. "Can you guarantee that the murderer won't kill me?" "Of course." Hellion Vivian smiled. "And I'll find out who he is very soon." Gua Tingting hesitated for a moment before saying, I was really asleep, but I didn't close the window and was bitten by mosquitoes. Just as I was about to light a mosquito coil, I heard a heavy sound of something falling from the opposite side. Then I looked up and saw a figure standing on a rooftop. It seemed like he was looking down. So you saw Dong Sichuan's murderer? Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. Why didn't you tell the police about such an important matter? Gua Tingting hurriedly explained, they didn't ask me about this at all. Moreover, the school obviously wants to keep this matter under wraps. I don't know whether Dong Sichuan committed suicide or was murdered. How can I talk about this kind of thing so casually? Actually, this isn't the main point. Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. You didn't say anything because you don't like Dong Sichuan. Also, you're going to graduate in half a year. You don't want to get into any trouble because of this matter. Gua Tingting paused for a moment, and her entire face turned red. I really don't like her. Why should I take the risk to speak up for such a bitch? Okay, then let me ask you. Since you didn't tell the police about this matter, who did you tell? Hellion Vivian went straight to the point. After all, this was the key to determining the murderer this time. Gua Tingting shook her head with a confused expression. I'm the only one who knows about this. Think about it carefully. Have you ever accidentally revealed? Hellion Vivian tried to recall Gua Tingting's memory, especially during this period of time. Gua Tingting still shook her head. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and said, but I have a habit of posting short stories. I wrote a short story about this incident and posted it on my WeChat moments. But what's wrong with that? I've anthropomorphized everything. I didn't even mention the time and place. It's all in the eyes of the murderer, so there's a problem. Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. If I'm not wrong, when the police questioned you, they must have asked you if you saw anything on a rooftop. After all, that building was very close to your dormitory. At that time, your curtains were drawn. As long as you weren't sleeping very deeply, you must have seen something. The police had asked you this question, and with the story you posted later, the murderer would quickly connect the dots and realize that you were actually lying at that time. This murderer might be very stupid when it comes to judging women, but he's very smart in other aspects. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used this secret room to kill someone. Gua Tingting's eyes trembled. When she thought about how all of her actions had been observed by the murderer, she couldn't help but feel scared. Hellion Vivian continued. That's why he mistakenly thought that Zhang Heng was Dong Sichuan's murderer. Because of a short story you posted, in his eyes, other than Dong Sichuan, there was only Zhang Heng on the rooftop. The person who pushed Dong Sichuan down was definitely Zhang Heng. It wasn't Zhang Heng, Gua Tingting vehemently denied. I never said that the figure was Zhang Heng. Hellion Vivian looked at her indifferently. Yes, you didn't say that the figure was Zhang Heng, but you also didn't tell the murderer that the figure was tall, short, fat, or thin. That's why he killed the wrong person. At this point, Gua Tingting didn't say anything and just lowered her head. What I want to investigate isn't the previous case, but the current one. At this point, Hellion Vivian looked up and glanced at Chen Feiyang. Mr. Chen, now that things have come to this, are you still going to say that all of this is nonsense? Chen Feiyang didn't say anything. His hands were clenched tightly. I know you suspect me, but I can tell you that I've never killed anyone before. Since this is a murder in a secret room, it must have been planned from the beginning. This secret room isn't mine. No matter how much I know about mechanisms, there's no way I would use these mechanisms in an unfamiliar secret room. I think there should be guides on the internet regarding this secret room. Since you know the background story of this secret room, it's not impossible for you to find out all of the mechanisms. Hellion Wei said slowly. Moreover, you were the one who took the lead throughout the entire journey. You were the fastest in solving the problem. Although you didn't solve the last lock, it was obvious that the murderer was the fastest in solving the problem in this secret room. It was because this secret room was in line with all his inner desires that he chose to kill people here, right? Chen Feiyang was rendered speechless by Hellion Vivian, but he was a top student after all, so he reacted quickly. You've said so much, but where is the evidence? You haven't found any evidence yet, and you're already certain that I'm the murderer? I haven't decided that you're the murderer. Surprisingly, Hellion Vivian gave him this answer. Chen Feiyang was stunned. The other three also thought that Hellion Vivian had decided that Chun Fei-yong was the murderer. After all, from the looks of it, he was the most suspicious. Furthermore, it was clear that Hellion Vivian had suspected him from the beginning. So why did she suddenly say that she wasn't certain? I need to ask the shop owner some questions before I can organize my thoughts. So let's go out first. Hellion Vivian stroked the steel pipe with her fingers and looked at the red handwriting on the wall. Each handwriting represented an original sin. Jealousy, arrogance, indifference. Comparing all the original sins with their corresponding colors, a pattern was quickly discovered. With the 6-digit password, Hellion Vivian successfully opened the last safe. There was a letter inside. There was only one sentence written on it. I brought them here. That line of words was typed, so it couldn't be seen who wrote it. Naturally, it was also a prop in the secret room. Other than the letter, there was only one key here. It seemed to symbolize the end of the story, and only one person could walk out. Hellion Vivian curled her thin lips, picked up the key, walked to the side, and clicked. The wooden door opened. The shop owner was waiting for them in the courtyard outside the door worriedly. He didn't expect the 6 of them to come out so quickly, so he raised his hand to look at his watch. It's only been 40 minutes, and you've already cleared the level? They didn't even ask for a hint from the beginning to the end? Wasn't this a little too unbelievable? He had never met such a player before. Hellion Vivian nodded faintly and turned to the side. Sunlight shone into the secret room from the courtyard. When the shop owner saw the steel pipes poking down, his mind went blank. Chapter 1060. Did anything happen to you guys? Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He didn't forget how the last young man died. He was stabbed to death by these steel pipes. Hellion Weiwei chuckled. There was a small accident, but it's still within control. I went in too quickly just now, so I didn't ask about many things in detail. Shopkeeper, do you still remember who told you to order the Sobbing House theme when these people first came to play? I don't remember clearly, but now that you ask, it seems to be this young man. The shop owner turned to look at Chun Fei-yong. Chun Fei-yong sneered. We decided to play this secret room together. When I called to book it, they were beside me. I wasn't the one who suggested it. Hellion Weiwei only glanced at him and didn't reply. Instead, she furrowed her eyebrows. She felt strange. That's right. Shop owner, why are these steel pipes so sharp? Hellion Vivian looked at the shop owner's face, trying to find some clues. Aren't you afraid that the players will be in danger when they play this secret room? The shop owner paused for a moment before saying, in the game, there's no mention of steel pipes poking down. That's why I'm curious as well. Where did these steel pipes come from? These steel pipes are used when installing mechanisms. You're the person who opened this secret room. How can you not know that they might pop out? Hellion Vivian didn't believe this excuse. When the shop owner heard Hellion Vivian's question, he realized that she had misunderstood. Master, although I know a little about feng shui, I'm not familiar with these mechanisms. Moreover, this game wasn't created by me. In our line of work, if we want to maintain the novelty of the game, we have to change the theme after a while. Otherwise, all the passwords will be easily cracked. When that happens, people will look at the guides online and become less and less interested. Also, escape rooms like us pay a lot of attention to attracting returning customers. Of course, the theme of the secret room has to be changed frequently to keep the customers. Take those young men, for example. It wasn't their first time here. They came here before the accident. There were 6 of them. Wait a minute. You're saying that when they played Sobbing House, wasn't their first time here? Hellion Vivian's eyes suddenly flashed, full of sharpness. Yes. Is there a problem? The shop owner looked at Hellion Vivian in confusion. The others also didn't understand why Hellion Vivian had such a reaction. After all, they really couldn't guess what Hellion Vivian was thinking. Hellion Weiwei looked at the steel pipes again, and a shocking thought popped up in her mind. When did the Sobbing House come out? Did they come a play not long after it came out? How do you know? The shop owner looked at Hellion Vivian in surprise. In fact, before Sobbing House came out, I received a call from them, but I don't remember who it was. It sounded like a boy, and he asked me when the new content of the secret room would come out this time. Strangely, the new secret room was not announced on the internet. At that time, I was wondering how this young man knew. Hellion Vivian's eyes flashed brighter. You're saying that he knew in advance that Sobbing House was going to be made? Yes. Don't you think it's strange? The shop owner was still shaking his head. Hellion Vivian grasped the most fatal point. The person who knew in advance that Sobbing House was going to be made was the murderer. She was still wavering between the two boys. If this decisive evidence came out, everything would be easy to solve. But since there was no announcement, how did the murderer know about the contents of Sobbing House? Hellion Vivian's mind replayed the recording when they entered the secret room. The password to unlock every room, every recording of the story, and even every setting were related to Dong Sichuan's death. If the murder scene reflected the murderer's deepest desires, then wasn't this too much of a coincidence? Hellion Vivian suddenly paused and turned to look at the shop owner. You just said that the game here wasn't set up by you. Then how did Sobbing House's secret room come out? The shop owner tilted his head and thought. I remember that I posted a post in the online shop asking for questions. On the one hand, I wanted the shop to become more popular. On the other hand, I had a general idea of how to develop the secret room. Because the shop's business had always been very good, I would directly give rewards to the participants who provided the ideas. The rewards weren't much, ranging from 1,000 yuan to 200 yuan, but you didn't expect that there would be a perfect plan for the secret room. Hellion Vivian interrupted the shop owner's words very clearly. This plan not only provided the ideas, but it even made all the game content, including the background story, the recording prompts, and how to set up the mechanisms. All of this gave off a terrifying and mysterious atmosphere. It was simply in line with the secret room in your heart. So you directly adopted the plan provided by the other party. The shop owner was completely shocked. He really didn't expect that the other party even knew about this. Master, did you calculate all of this? Hellion Vivian smiled and didn't answer the shop owner's question. Instead, she asked another question. Have you seen the person who provided the plan? No, the plan he provided was too perfect. Even the mechanism operation and the prompts given by the walkie-talkie were in the plan. The construction was also very easy. I did say that I would treat him to a meal, but ever since he gave me the plan for the secret room, I couldn't send a message to his mailbox. I didn't even know where to transfer the money. The shop owner shook his head regretfully, but I can see that this is a veteran escape room enthusiast. His thinking is really meticulous. He even knows how to set up the mechanisms and even has a detailed production plan. It's simply amazing. Hellion Vivian smiled again, the corners of her mouth curling into a faint, playful smile. I think I know who the murderer is. Murderer? The shop owner didn't understand. What murderer? Hellion Vivian looked at him. Shop owner, Zhang Heng's death in your shop was an accident. It was a long-planned conspiracy. Chapter 1061. The shopkeeper was stunned once again. This time, even his head was buzzing. Who is it? Who is the murderer? Guotingting's voice was sharp. Right now, she really didn't have an ounce of rationality to speak of. Hellion Vivian didn't know how to communicate with this kind of person, so she simply didn't say anything. She only said to the shop owner, Can you still find this email in your mailbox? This is fine. I've been keeping it. I haven't deleted it. The shop owner said as he turned on his computer. But the other party didn't use a QQ email. When we first communicated, he said that he was overseas. After that, he didn't reply to any of my messages. Here, look, these are the records I sent him. I wanted to transfer money to him, but I don't know if it's because he's overseas, but he changed his email, so I can't contact him at all. Hellion Vivian still had a faint smile on her face. This person isn't overseas at all. That's just a lie he made up. The shop owner's eyes widened again. Hellion Vivian held her phone and clicked on the computer screen. A photo appeared on Hellion Vivian's phone, just like that. What are you doing? Why would she take a photo at a time like this? Hellion Vivian lowered her eyes and opened the chat window on WeChat. Monkey, help me check the email address in this photo. I can't find anything. The shop owner waved his hand. I have a lot of friends online. They only found that this email address was indeed registered in China, but they couldn't find anything else. Hellion Vivian smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Only one person clenched her fists tightly at this moment. Guotingting was also very anxious. Compared to these unimportant things, can you tell us first? You just said that you already know the murderer. Who exactly is he? Zhao Xiaodong. Hellion Vivian's voice was very faint, as if she didn't mean to. Guotingting was stunned. Xiao Jingtian also didn't expect this to be the result. She first glanced at Chun Feiyong before her gaze landed on Zhao Xiaodong. Chun Feiyong was also surprised. He thought that this high school student in front of him, who had a wild imagination and was pretending to be mysterious, would identify him as the murderer. Not a single person thought so. As a result, Zhao Xiaodong's expression went blank at that moment. Then, he pointed at himself and said, "Me? Miss Hellion, are you sure you didn't point to the wrong person?" "No, it's you." Hellion Wei's smile deepened. "You're not bad at acting, and you're smart enough. You're also very meticulous in your thinking, and you don't panic when you kill people. It's a pity that you have eyes but fail to see, falling for a girl like that. Student Zhao Xiaodong, your ability to distinguish between women is really not that great. That's why you revealed so many clues, allowing me to follow along and link them together. Should I thank Dong Sikhan?" Zhao Xiaodong's face was red, as if he was very angry. He was very unwilling. "I don't understand what you're saying at all. I haven't said a single word from the beginning to the end. How can you be so sure that I'm the murderer? Didn't you say something in the end?" Hellion Vivian looked up and glanced at him coldly. "Weren't you the one who reminded us that we could see the rooftop through the window?" Zhao Xiaodong snorted and was a little puzzled. "You're saying that I'm the murderer just because of that?" I just saw that sentence and analyzed the answer. What's wrong with that? I'm not saying that you're the murderer just because of that. Hellion Wei smiled. I'm the kind of person who likes to study a person's psychology through words and actions. To be honest with you, from the very beginning, you were the person I suspected the most. When the wooden cabinet was pulled open, you were the last one to come out, followed by Zhang Heng's death. All the logic in solving a case is basically to find the problem from the person closest to the crime scene. I thought that after arriving at the crime scene, I would find some traces of your crime in the wooden cabinet. Unfortunately, it's been half a year, and some of the traces have long disappeared. Moreover, this place has been searched by the police, so I also suspected that my initial judgment might have missed something. Also, Qin Feiyong seems to like Dong Sikhan too much, so I never ruled him out as a suspect. I was never sure who the murderer was between the two of you, but I did a careful analysis. Qin Feiyong's performance in school was not bad, and his looks were outstanding. As long as he graduated, he would be recognized by countless companies. Furthermore, Xiao Jingtian likes him, so his future path in life can be said to be smooth sailing. So, there's no need for him to ruin his future for Dong Sikhan. To be frank, if we hadn't mentioned this person today, he wouldn't have felt the slightest bit of guilt. Qin Feiyong's voice was very deep. I never said that I liked Sikhan. The person I like has always been Jingtian. It hasn't changed since high school. But you really enjoy being pursued by her, don't you? Hellion Vivian sneered. Otherwise, you wouldn't have helped her with some things. To put it bluntly, you want everything. Nothing will happen between you and Dong Sikhan now. But who can guarantee that in the future? You say that you like Miss Xiao, but most of the time, when faced with a choice between two people, you will choose Dong Sikhan. This is also why it's so painful. Mr. Chun, to be honest, you're really the worst man I've ever met. When Guotingting found out that the murderer wasn't Qin Feiyong, her attitude instantly changed. Aren't you going a little too far by saying that about Feiyong? Feiyong has always been very warm, and everyone knows this. Hellion Vivian glanced at Guotingting, but didn't say anything, because she was afraid that Guotingting would beat her up. She really couldn't communicate with some girls. Were their brains made of tofu? How did they get into graduate school? On the other side, Hellion Vivian was still narrowing her eyes, preparing for a fight. His Highness, who had been silent all this time, curled his thin lips into a faint smile, and his eyes were cold. Could it be that this young lady doesn't know the definition of the term war man? It's actually very simple. A war man is equivalent to a green tea bitch among women. Just now, You seem to be saying that these men are very stupid and can't see through the nature of cheap women. In my opinion, you're not much better. You also can't see through the nature of a war man, right? Gua Tingting was completely speechless, and all the words she wanted to say were stuck in her throat. This feeling of being stuck between a rock and a hard place was really unbearable. Hellion Vivian was a little stunned. Although it wasn't very nice, she really wanted to laugh. His Highness was still the best. His poisonous tongue could really infuriate people to death. When Bailey Jiaju turned his head around, he saw a certain someone secretly laughing. Chapter 1062. The corners of the man's lips curled up lovingly. Was she that happy? Of course, Hellion Vivian was happy. She knew that His Highness had always been mean to her. He rarely said that to others. It was rare to see him, so she was in a good mood. Baligaju looked at her thin, lips curled up slightly. He wanted to reach out and pull her into his arms like before. The moment he raised his fingers, he remembered something. A cold light suddenly flashed in his deep eyes. That order was still not rescinded. Hellion Vivian blinked. She thought that the murderous aura from a man was directed at Gua Tingting, so she quickly stood in front of His Highness. It was fine to be mean, but never kill someone. It was troublesome to explain. Although this girl didn't think much of men and was a little stupid, she was only showing her personality at her age. Let's not deviate from the topic. Hellion Vivian's voice returned to normal. She glanced at Gua Tingting, who was blushing. At this time, we're talking about the murderer. I don't care about what kind of person Mr. Chun is. I'm just saying my analysis. Zhao Xiaodong took advantage of the loophole and pushed his glasses up with a sneer. In other words, you're certain that I'm the murderer based on your illusory analysis? Little girl, you've been pretending to be mysterious from the beginning. I admit that you're indeed smarter and you're faster playing the secret room. But you can't say that a person is a murderer with just a few words. I can sue you for slandering my reputation. Mr. Zhao, I advise you not to talk about the law with me. Hellion Vivian, who had fought countless lawsuits in the United States, took a step forward. Also, I've never pretended to be mysterious. Now that you're saying this, I can sue you for the same crime. Didn't you want to talk about something more substantial? You like Dong Sik-hun so much so that you were willing to do anything for her. At first, you didn't want to kill them, but instead followed each and every one of them. Gradually, you discovered many things that you didn't know. For example, Gua Tingting had clearly seen everything that happened on the rooftop that night, but she didn't tell the police anything. Another example was Zhang Heng, who had been intimate with Dong Sik-hun. At that time, you felt that the goddess in your heart who couldn't be sullied had jumped off the building because she couldn't stand being forced by Zhang Heng. You viewed everyone as Dong Sichuan's murderer. Even though there were many loopholes and contradictions in your investigation, you weren't willing to believe that the innocent girl wasn't what you imagined her to be. Before I came here, I had someone investigate the interactions between each of you and Dong Sik-hun. It's very strange. You're a person who doesn't have a job yet, but you're so willing to spend money on Dong Sik-hun. When she wanted an iPhone, you helped someone write a thesis and bought it for her. After you gave it to her, you felt especially satisfied. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to invade your privacy. But you should have a habit of posting things on your WeChat moments. I took a quick look at it. As Hellion Vivian spoke, she unlocked her phone and opened a few pictures. These were sent to me by someone who investigated you. There's a screenshot of your WeChat moments. It's about Dong Sik-hun a few days ago. You posted it on your WeChat moments. You gave her the 5S. Although she didn't accept your pursuit, she didn't reject your goodwill either. You felt that you still had hope, so you encouraged yourself. There's also a comment from Zhang Heng below. He wrote it very clearly. He asked if you were stupid. Why did you have to give your hard-earned money to a bitch? You gave her whatever she wanted with both hands. He also said that you'd be a second-class cripple for the rest of your life. You're short and ugly, so you should save it. That woman doesn't even like you. You're really retarded. After Hellion Vivian finished reading the contents of the picture, she looked up at Zhao Xiaodong's face, which was already distorted. To put it bluntly, the reason why you targeted Zhang Heng as your first target was not only because you felt that he violated Dong Sik-hun on the rooftop that day, but also because he often ridiculed you. You hated that the most, and it was obvious that you couldn't tolerate him describing your goddess like that. Because of this, you even went back and forth with him on WeChat moments. You said that he was a playboy with straight male chauvinism, and that he looked at all women differently. However, Mr. Zhang Heng was right. You were really foolish and wishful thinking. It was your own business to buy things for your goddess, yet you asked everyone else to do the same and only praise your goddess. It's obvious that if a woman was really good, she wouldn't accept the iPhone you gave her. If she accepted it, she would accept you as well. However, Dong Sikhan obviously only wanted the phone, and after she did, she even kicked you aside. You said that such a woman was good. No wonder Zhang Heng didn't like you so much. That's between me and Zhang Heng. Zhao Xiaodong growled, and the veins on his face bulged. Also, do you even understand Sikhan? Why are you using your vicious thoughts to guess her? Little girl, for someone like you who doesn't have good morals, I'm afraid you'll think that anyone is a murderer, right? Do you think that anyone will believe you if you say that you want to kill someone just because of a WeChat moments like this? In order to let you know what the goddess in your heart is like, I'll give you this opportunity to get to know her better. Helian Wei Wei turned her head and looked at Guo Tingting with a smile. You should know better, right? What did Dong Sikhan say when she received the phone from Zhao Xiaodong that day? Guo Tingting hated Dong Sikhan to begin with. Now that she had the opportunity, she naturally had to tell Dong Sikhan everything that had been buried in her heart for a long time. Of course I know. It's not just about the phone. There was one time when Dong Sikhan wanted a Gucci wallet, but she didn't have the money to buy it. She also subconsciously revealed it to Zhao Xiaodong. Dong Sikhan only pretended to be pretty in front of the boys. She would say anything in front of me and Jing Tian, especially her evaluation of Zhao Xiaodong. In the beginning, when Zhao Xiaodong liked her, she was really annoyed. If Zhao Xiaodong hadn't been in the same dormitory as Fei Yong, she wouldn't have bothered with him at all. Later, she realized that Zhao Xiaodong had some value that she could use, so she didn't express her dislike for him. After all, if she went overboard, it would affect her image in the eyes of the boys. Chapter 1063. At this point, Guo Tingting laughed disdainfully. After receiving the iPhone from Zhao Xiaodong, she even said to me and Jing Tian in the dormitory, "Don't you think Zhao Xiaodong is an idiot? I'm so annoyed with him, but he's still like a lapdog and keeps buying me things. But this thing is pretty good, so let's bring it along when we eat later. After all, he gave me a gift." Did you hear that? Helian Vivian tilted her head so that she could meet Zhao Xiaodong's gaze. A devilish smile spread across her face. She was not a kind person to begin with, not to mention that she was facing a case like this. Of course, her methods were different from others. Zhao Xiaodong's entire face was dyed crimson with anger. Sikhan wouldn't talk like that. The only person who would talk like that is you, Guo Tingting. Zhao Xiaodong, let me say this first. I'm indeed not a good person, but I always show it on the outside. Your goddess Sikhan is the real bitch, okay? Guo Tingting crossed her arms in disdain. At that time, Jing Tian was also there. She even angrily told Dong Sikhan not to play with people like this. Your goddess Sikhan won't listen to others. She thinks you're a toad, and accepting your gift is a gift to you. Didn't you also post on your WeChat moments that you felt the same way? I can tell you that Zhang Heng and I are the same type of person. Although he didn't take you seriously, we have the most basic human nature. He said that to remind you. But look at you. You killed him just like that. Guo Tingting roared out the last sentence as tears streamed down her face. At this time, Zhao Xiaodong calmed down and said with a fake smile, "Don't make yourself sound so noble. All of you only look down on people from small places like us. Also, there's no evidence to prove that I'm the murderer, and I've never killed anyone. Guo Tingting, if you keep crying and screaming that I'm the murderer, then we can only meet in court." As he spoke, he looked at Helian Vivian. It's time for this farce to end. A few graduate students were fooled by a high school student, and they suspected each other of this and that. That's enough. I thought it was a powerful on my OG, but it turns out that it was just a group of people who investigated us first and then came to read our fortunes. Taobao shops nowadays are really getting worse and worse. After saying this, Zhao Xiaodong wanted to leave. However, Hellion Vivian spoke again in a clear and powerful voice. Who said there's no evidence to prove that you're the murderer? The walkie-talkie in your hand is the best evidence. Zhao Xiaodong's body shook violently. His eyes trembled violently in a place where no one could see, to the extent that his pupils were dilating. He subconsciously clenched his left hand and turned around mockingly. The store owner gave me the walkie-talkie. You say it's evidence? I've never heard anything more ridiculous than this. To be precise, it's a murder weapon. Hellion Vivian walked towards him. Her long hair fluttered in the wind, and her aura was indescribably oppressive. I've always warned you not to do anything, but you didn't even listen. You thought that we were in your way and wanted to kill my assistant. Student Zhao, I won't let you off just because of this. This was the first time that the people present had seen Hellion Vivian show such a cold expression. At that moment, it was as if her whole body was exuding the smell of blood. From the moment they saw her, this high school student had a spring breeze-like smile on her face. They never thought that her murderous look would be so terrifying. The fury of the ancient phoenix was not something that anyone could withstand. Zhao Xiaodong began to tremble uncontrollably, but he still didn't give up defending himself. Everything you say now is filled with strong personal feelings. You're biting me with such righteous indignation. You even made up the story that the walkie-talkie killed people. Even the police won't believe you, let alone go to court. It seems that student Zhao is so arrogant because you're sure that I can't find out how you killed people. Hellion Vivian laughed. You're right. When I entered the locked room, I didn't find any clues to activate the switch. It's because the murder scene is too clean. Even if it's a locked room murder, there must be an auxiliary tool to complete it. I've been thinking about what this auxiliary tool is until the store manager mentioned that the person who provided this plan not only clearly wrote down the mechanism, but also set up the walkie-talkie. Under normal circumstances, one only needs to set up the light cards of each room. The hints will be given to everyone after the locked room is completed. In other words, the walkie-talkie should have been set up by the store manager, but this time it's very unusual. And the person who played the escape room twice with the walkie-talkie was you. Zhao Xiaodong laughed. You're really careful. You're just saying whatever comes to your mind. I just like to play the escape room with the walkie-talkie. And you're saying that I'm a murderer? Is there any logic to it? What is the necessary connection between these two things? I'm speechless. It's indeed not that logical to just play with the walkie-talkie. Hellion Vivian laughed. She lowered her eyes and turned on her phone. There was a video on the screen, and the content was a document that had been sent. The name of the document was clearly written with two big words, Sobbing House. What if you were the one who provided this escape room plan in the first place? Wouldn't you be able to confirm your suspicion of murder then? Hearing this, Zhao Xiaodong's back suddenly trembled, and panic appeared on his ordinary face for the first time. Hellion Vivian smiled wickedly. Come, Monkey, let student Zhao see where you guys are right now. Monkey quickly flashed out. The image on the phone not only made Zhao Xiaodong's face turn pale. Even the other three people widened their eyes in disbelief. That was their school's male dormitory, and it was specially used for graduate students to live in. Why? Why would the person the other party sent out be in their school's male dormitory? Guo Tingting and Xiao Jingtian looked at each other. They didn't understand what was going on at all. Behind Monkey, there was a handsome young man in a leather jacket with a cold expression on his face. A screeching sound came from a phone. Hey, boss, can you hear me? Fuck, why is the signal so bad? Let me tell you, you don't know how dangerous it was just now. I almost pointed a gun at someone, but fortunately, I stopped him. And old A and the others. All of them are dressed like they're trying to collect protection fees, but they still insist that they're university students. They're so stupid. Chapter 1064. Hellion Vivian listened to the commotion as if the wall was about to be torn down. She held her forehead with her fingertips and sneered. Monkey, get to the point. The rest of you, if you don't keep quiet, you're not allowed to hug Qingshun anymore. When the rugged men with explosive destructive power heard this, they instantly straightened their backs and stood in line. Getting the little boss's favor was the goal they had been pursuing all their lives. Without the little boss around for the past 2 days, they felt like they had nothing left to live for. If they couldn't hug her in the future, just thinking about that scene made them feel so sad and cruel. Helene Vivian was already used to the behavior of her silly subordinates. The corners of her mouth twitched, and she didn't look at the rugged faces of the rugged men. She said to Monkey, "The documents are 100% restored?" "Of course." Monkey gave a thumbs up. "It will be troublesome to track him down. After all, so much time has passed, and it's hard to track him down. Fortunately, Boss said that she would come to this school to look for him. At least it saved me 3 days and 3 nights of tracking. As long as his laptop hasn't been changed, I can find him by following the traces. This kid is quite smart. He knows to clear the documents at a fixed time. I used the recovery recycle bin to retrieve the previous documents. It took some time, but everything went smoothly." "Very good." Helene Vivian's thin lips curled. "Point your phone at his computer screen. I want him to see it with his own eyes." Monkey naturally did as she said. Zhao Xiaodong looked at the page that he couldn't be more familiar with. The expression on his face couldn't be maintained anymore. Helene Vivian's voice was still smiling, like a death god coming to claim his life. "Student Zhao, you shouldn't be unfamiliar with this chat screen, right? To prevent you from trying to get away with your glib tongue, I asked them to restore the email you used to submit your submission to the store manager. There was only 1 sent document. Did you think that I wouldn't be able to find you just because you didn't leave your personal information when you registered? Student Zhao, you underestimate me. On my OG who only knows how to play tricks." Zhao Xiaodong still didn't speak. His entire face was ashen. The store manager's reaction was very big. He pointed at Vivian's phone screen and exclaimed, "It's this email. This is the email address that sent me the Sobbing House's secret room plan." Student Zhao, Helene Vivian put away her phone. Her actions were handsome, and her words were concise. She went straight to the point. "If this plan of yours is handed over to the police to ask professionals to study it, they will immediately analyze the flaws in it. Why those unnecessary steel pipes appeared in this plan, and what function the walkie-talkies played, they will know with a simple investigation. As for you, don't even think about escaping this calamity." Hearing this, Zhao Xiaodong laughed softly. Then he took off his glasses, and the fierceness on his face was obvious. "I really don't understand. My plan was so perfect. How did you find out about these things? Shouldn't you suspect Chen Feiyong the most? He's clearly more qualified to be a murderer than I am. Because of all the background story and props in the secret room, everything you did was related to your heart. You restored everything that happened back then. Since then, I've been thinking, how could the content of a secret room be as high as 90% similar to your experience? Unless there's something I don't know about. So when I reached the 3rd level, I had already sent someone to your school to wait. As expected, it was very rewarding. Fortunately, the store manager didn't forget the origin of this secret room plan." Helene Vivian stretched and said in a very calm voice, "Okay, it's over. I've also found the evidence you've been thinking about. Student Zhao, go to jail obediently." Of course, Zhao Xiaodong wouldn't give in so easily. His first reaction was to run. Who would have thought that as soon as he turned around, something would fly over from behind and stab him in the back of his leg? Zhao Xiaodong immediately crawled on the ground in pain. He hugged his leg and looked to the side. It was a young man in a black suit. Speaking of this, he felt that it was inconceivable. The mechanism he had set up would definitely kill someone. Those steel pipes would definitely kill someone. Why wasn't the other party injured at all? He had originally thought that one more person dying would be able to divert everyone's attention. He hadn't expected that he would fail. Zhao Xiaodong grimaced as he looked up at Beligaju. This was undoubtedly the biggest failure of his plan. And that high school student. Zhao Xiaodong turned his head and looked at Helene Vivian, his face extremely pale. Helene Vivian didn't even look at him as she walked past him. Wait a minute. Zhao Xiaodong endured the piercing pain in his body, his lips trembling. Since you're so capable and can find out everything, and you said that I wrongly avenged Sikhun and that Zhang Heng wasn't the one who killed her, then who is the murderer? And who is the murderer? Hellion Vivian glanced to the side without a trace of warmth. Why should I tell you? You know who that person is, don't you? Zhao Xiaodong became agitated. Help me find that person. Hellion Vivian stopped in her tracks and said in a calm voice, I've always thought that no matter what kind of love in this world, at the very least, it requires equality. You like her, and she respects you. It's not a pity that a woman like Dong Sikhun died. In a relationship, many people break up for various reasons, but it doesn't matter. The most disgusting thing is a woman who interferes in other people's families and plays with other people's feelings. She's no longer around because the heavens have eyes. She treated you so badly, yet you still want to avenge her. Should I say that you're a scumbag who deserve a scumbag? Student Zhao, when you have time, think about your parents. How do they treat you? Is it worth ruining your entire life for such a woman? Zhao Xiaodong didn't say anything else. He was suddenly stunned. At that moment, the only image that appeared in his mind was that his mother had come to Beijing and couldn't bear to go to Starbucks. She had said, son, one drink costs more than 30 yuan. That's too expensive. I won't drink it. Mom will buy it for you. What do you want to drink? He came from a small town, and his parents were very ordinary workers. There was no coffee shop like Starbucks in their county. His mother really couldn't bear to part with it. But no matter how reluctant she was, she still ordered him a cup of iced cappuccino on such a hot day. At that time, he thought that she was embarrassing because she didn't even know how to order coffee. Of course, it was embarrassing. To them, and especially to Dong Sikhun, Starbucks was nothing more than an ordinary thing. Chapter 1065. His mother, on the other hand, was like a country bumpkin. She wore ordinary clothes and even seemed a little old-fashioned. She didn't even know how to take the subway. Her voice was unusually loud, as if she was always afraid that he would get lost. He couldn't help but flare up at her when he saw how timid she was. He picked up a cup of coffee and threw it at her. His mother was a little dumbfounded, as if she had been frightened by his sudden anger. At that time, he told himself in his heart that he must never let anyone else in school know that his mother was like this, because that would be too embarrassing. He didn't want Dong Sikhun to look down on him. Because of this, at that time, his mother really wanted to go to his school to take a look. She even said that she wanted to treat him and his close friends to a meal. How could he agree? He didn't care if there were seats available at that time. He bought a train ticket at the last minute and told her to hurry back. That day, he threw a tantrum from beginning to end. He clearly knew that she didn't know how to take the subway, but he didn't even send her off because he was in a hurry to buy an iPhone for Dong Sikhun. Later, he didn't know how his mother got to the train station. But at that time, when he received a call, she was still smiling on the other end of the phone. She told him not to worry about his family and to focus on his studies. If he didn't have enough money to spend, he could ask her for more. She also said that he could eat whatever he wanted and not treat himself badly. She also said that he shouldn't be greedy when sleeping and that he should cover himself with a blanket. At that time, he only felt impatient and said, I'm not a 3-year-old child. I know all this. How troublesome. Then he hung up the phone. Later, he found out from his father that because his mother didn't know how to get to the train station, she was stuck in traffic and didn't manage to catch the train that night. She spent the night at the station and only bought a new ticket the next day to go home. Zhao Xiaodong didn't know why, but he only remembered these details now. Every scene was so clear in his mind. She clearly couldn't bear to part with it, but she was willing to do anything for him. He couldn't imagine how his mother, who was unfamiliar with this place, could curl up at the train station for an entire night, just for the rest of the 200 yuan rest fee. However, he had spent more than 6,000 yuan on an Apple phone for a woman who had called him a harpie. Among them, 3,000 yuan was specially sent to him by his mother, Zhao Xiaodong's words. He couldn't describe how he felt. His throat, and on the other hand, felt like he was being burned by a blazing fire. It was so painful that all that was left of him was ashes. Then he began to cry. He buried his face in his arms and bawled like a child. Hellion Vivian put away the prayer beads and did not look at him again. Most of the time we forget. In this world, there will always be someone who looks at us without asking for anything in return. Unfortunately, the older he grew, the more selfish he became. Zhao Xiaodong finally understood this principle. His mother didn't know how to do those things. Did she also feel bad at heart? However, as someone who knew everything, he didn't teach her. Instead, he felt that she was an embarrassment. Sometimes, the older your parents get, the more they remind you to pay attention to these and that. Actually, it's because she misses you. Why is it that when we were young, everything was taught by our parents? But when we grow up, we put them at the bottom of the list because of many things. Police cars roared from the long alley. They took Zhao Xiaodong and a few others away. After all, someone had called the police, so they had to make a statement. Under normal circumstances, the murderer would defend himself. They didn't expect Zhao Xiaodong to be so quiet, except for being blunt about his crime. He only said one sentence to the police. "Can you not tell my mother that I like that kind of woman?" The police were stunned. "Okay, thank you." After Zhao Xiaodong said this, he didn't speak again. The rest of the people had already recorded their statements. Hellion Vivian was the most familiar with this process, so she finished writing in 2 or 3 sentences. When she brought Beligaju out of the interrogation, only Guo Tingting was outside. She looked like she was waiting for Chun Fei-yong, and she was very infatuated. When she saw Hellion Vivian and the others walking over, there was a hint of hesitation on her face. She asked Hellion Vivian tentatively, "I heard what you said to Zhao Xiaodong. You said that there were 2 murderers among us. One killed Zhang Heng, and the other killed Dong Sikan. Now, there's another murderer. Who is that person? Who do you think it is?" Hellion Vivian smiled faintly and asked in return, "Didn't you see that person's shadow that day?" Guo Tingting's expression changed, and she said vaguely, "I didn't see it very clearly. Actually, besides you, there's another window that can see everything on the rooftop." Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. "Your dormitory building is not far from the rooftop. As for who it is, I won't say much if I don't have evidence. Besides, I only accepted this case. The rest of the investigation is the police's business. It has nothing to do with me." When Guo Tingting heard this, she shouted, "Oh my God, do you still want to hide something like this? If you know who the murderer is, don't you feel guilty if you don't report it?" "I said I don't have evidence." Hellion Vivian looked at her and laughed. "Besides, Miss Tingting, I know very well what you want to see in order to get Chun Fei-yong. I'm not a peacemaker. The investigation is left to the police. I only take what I want. I don't like Dong Sikan, and I don't have the obligation to help her find out who the murderer is. In that case, Miss Tingting doesn't seem to have the right to criticize me at all. When you saw the situation on the rooftop, you didn't tell the police. Did you think that you could only get Chun Fei-yong after Dong Sikan left?" Guo Tingting's face froze. "I must be crazy to say such things to a cold-blooded and dark high school student like you." After saying this, Guo Tingting walked in the opposite direction. Her hurried footsteps made it seem as if Hellion Vivian was a demon who had committed a heinous crime. "Huh." Hellion Vivian chuckled softly. Just as His Highness had said, sometimes people were really dirty from head to toe. She had double standards of morality and always stood on the high ground to demand things from others. Her own actions were excusable, but the actions of others were cold-blooded and dark. It was really funny. "Mississippi." Hellion Weiwei followed the voice and turned around. She saw Xiao Jingtian, who had just walked out of the interrogation room, standing behind her. Her eyes were filled with emotions as she said, "I have something to say to you." Hellion Vivian nodded and found a wooden bench to sit down. However, Xiao Jingtian didn't sit down. Instead, she stood to the side and only spoke after a while. "Actually, you already know who the other murderer is, right?" Chapter 1066. Hellion Vivian looked at her and slowly smiled. "That's right. I already know the identity of the other murderer." "Then why didn't you tell the police just now?" Xiao Jingtian clenched her hands and lowered her eyes a little. Hellion Vivian looked up at the clouds floating in the sky. Because I think it's better for the murderer to turn herself in. After all, the probability of accidentally pushing someone down is more than 90%. It's not like it was intentional murder. Xiao Jingtian was stunned. She suddenly looked up at Helene Vivian. Her eyes were as clear as water. She could see through everything, but she didn't say anything. Xiao Jingtian knew that the other party was being lenient. Some words didn't need to be said. Xiao Jingtian also sat down. After a while, she said in a low voice, "Thank you for this." "You're welcome. It's our shop's mission to serve our customers. As long as Miss Xiao remembers to transfer the money that hasn't been paid to my Alipay account, and if you have time, leave a good review for my Taobao shop, it will be perfect." Helene Wei stood up and put her hands into her pockets. Her posture was very cool as she casually stretched. Her eyes looked at a certain highness who was standing not far away. "I still have something to do tonight, so I'll be leaving first." Getting a certain highness drunk was the most important goal in life at this stage of her life. Xiao Jingtian also noticed Helene Vivian's gaze. A gentle smile appeared on her face. "You two really love each other. I didn't expect you to have such a deep relationship at such a young age. It's very enviable. It's just that when it comes to relationships, there are too many uncertainties." At this point, Xiao Jingtian lowered her head and looked at her hands. She lowered her voice and said, "The more you love each other, the more painful it will be when they betray each other. Love is just a product of hormones. It's just a trick to make people happy for a moment." Helene Vivian turned her head and looked at her. It was almost dusk. The golden sunlight shone down and inlaid a thin layer of light on Xiao Jingtian's long black hair. She was crying, although there was no sound. However, big drops of tears fell onto the back of his hand. She didn't have time to wipe them away. Only his hands were clenched tightly, and his shoulders were trembling. Helene Vivian paused for a moment, took his hand out of his trouser pocket, and pressed her head. "Your mother still needs you to take care of her. Don't cry all the time." Xiao Jingtian paused and said in a hoarse voice, "My mother has been with him for most of her life, but he wants to divorce my mother for the sake of a young girl. He wants my mother to leave with nothing. My mother can't bear to part with me, and she can't bear to part with this family, so she has always been hesitant." Helene Vivian didn't say anything. She just listened quietly. Xiao Jingtian's hands clenched even more tightly, and she even sounded a little fierce. But that woman was really insatiable. She thought that my mother wouldn't divorce him, so she kept sending messages to my mother to show off how much she was doted on. I didn't know anything. I only thought about my own matters. I didn't know that my mother slept very late every night. I didn't know that she was in a state where she couldn't sleep without medication. I didn't know how much pain she was in. Do you understand? My mother and the others were different from us at that age. We were still young, so we could accept all the betrayals and start all over again. My mother and the others couldn't. One day, she called me in a panic and said that she suspected that my father was having an affair. I said that she only knew how to let her imagination run wild. She didn't know how helpless she was when she called. I think that at that time, she just wanted someone to accompany her to deal with this matter. But like my father, I only said that she was letting her imagination run wild. Until I saw it with my own eyes, Xiao Jingtian's entire body tensed up when she said this. That was hatred. Hatred that couldn't be ignored. But it was so powerless. Why didn't I face it with my mother at that time? Xiao Jingtian bit her lip tightly. Since I was so stupid to let this relationship continue for as long as a year, I only found out when Dong Sikhan moved into my father's office and kept provoking my mother. So this was what she was most unwilling to accept. She didn't protect her mother when she needed protection. She had already made such a sound. Why didn't she take it seriously? If she had stayed with her more, her mother might have been able to get through it and wouldn't be as severely depressed as she was now. The person Xiao Jingtian hated the most was herself. She was the one who was the most unforgivable. Helene Vivian knew that she wouldn't get any good karma for doing this, but she still did it. It wasn't because of anything else, but because she saw a shadow of herself in Xiao Jingtian from back then. Let me tell you about me. Helene Vivian just stood there and stroked Xiao Jingtian's hair with her fingers. When my father cheated on me, I was still very young. I can't even remember how old I was. My mother couldn't take it anymore and jumped down from the second floor. She stopped breathing on the spot. I used to be so cold that I didn't seem like a human being, and I still look the same. When I face certain things, I'm always more inhumane than other people. However, I always believe that no matter how dark and untrustworthy the world is, there will always be someone who will appear when it's time to give you all the warmth and embrace. So, maintain your bottom line as a human being and don't throw yourself away. Tian Tian, an anxious voice interrupted their conversation. Helly and Vivian looked over and saw a rich lady in her 50s with messy hair running towards them. She looked Xiao Jingtian up and down. Do you hurt anywhere? Tell me. No. Xiao Jingtian looked up and grabbed her mother's hand. Her voice was extremely hoarse. Mom, divorce Dad. The rich lady was shocked, and her eyes turned red. Okay. With one word, the mother and daughter finally talked about this topic again. Xiao Jingtian reached out and hugged the rich lady. Like a child, she kept saying in a low voice, I'm sorry. The rich lady panicked and kept asking, Tian Tian, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? Or something along those lines. Helly and Vivian didn't look at her anymore. She tactfully walked away. How should she put it? She still felt a little sad. However, this little sadness instantly evaporated when she saw the miniature version of His Highness. The most important thing now was to resolve the relationship between her and His Highness as soon as possible. Well, she had to think about how to get him drunk tonight. She had to come up with a strategy. Also, the chains had to be made of black ice iron. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to suppress His Highness's demonic nature. However, in his current state, he shouldn't be so difficult to deal with. He would definitely be especially cute when drunk. Helly and Vivian looked at Beligaju, who was standing under the swaying shadow of the tree in a black suit. She smiled happily and was about to walk over as if nothing had happened. Chapter 1067. Swoosh. 3 very flashy sports cars rushed over from the other side of the road. With a nimble and beautiful turn, with a screech, the car came to a sudden stop in front of Wei Wei. Pa! The car door opened. The first to show his head was the elegant K. It was a very exaggerated outfit. Helly and Vivian didn't want to look at it. Then, a group of rough men came out. Fuck, can you guys stop squeezing? Monkey stretched out his hands and flapped them vigorously in the sports car. That scene was really full of jokes. Many people at the entrance of the police station were already looking over. However, they were all wearing black shirts. When they saw Helly and Vivian, they called out in unison, Boss! Their facial expressions were especially vicious. Each of them looked like a big shot in the underworld. It made the police stare at them like they were thieves. They hesitated whether to arrest the female high school student again and interrogate her. Was she a second-generation gangster? The most people in Beijing were the second generation of officials. Which family was so powerful to have a second-generation gangster, and a woman at that? The police stopped moving and stood there vigilantly. As a sniper who was very sensitive to sight, young L wanted to shoot at the people who were looking at him again. Fortunately, he was stopped by Monkey. You can't. Hero, you can't make a move here. Helly and Vivian. Why did Monkey start to talk about ancient Chinese after not seeing him for a few days? Did he read too much classical Chinese? It had been a long time since she had a headache. Compared to the commotion on their side, the person who got out of the other extended Rolls-Royce was very elegant. It was Special Assistant Long, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. He was dressed in a white suit, and his entire person was filled with wisdom. Wang Fei, you look younger and younger. Where's the king? Is he still there? This was the normal style. Why was it that they were both subordinates, but when she showed them, they were rough men who collected protection fees? On a certain prince's side, they were all elite nobles. Sigh. Helly and Vivian let out a long sigh. Special Assistant Long thought that something had happened. Princess, did something happen to the king? He's fine. Helly and Vivian pointed to the opposite side. Where is he? Forget it. You won't understand my sadness. Azure Dragon really didn't understand, But when he saw the figure that had shrunk by a third, his eyes shook. King Beligaju glanced at him leisurely. His gaze was the same as before, indifferent and emotionless, but it made people feel an unprecedented sense of oppression. This was because the demonic nature in his body had reached its peak. The azure dragon silently closed his mouth, wondering why the king had revealed this form. He was secretly pulled aside by Hellion Vivian. Azure Dragon, how much do you know about His Highness' alcohol tolerance? Fortunately, it was the Azure Dragon. If it was the Fire Cheelin, it would have cried out in surprise. Azure Dragon was relatively calm. After a moment of confusion, he replied in a low voice, I'm not sure about His Majesty's alcohol tolerance, but after coming here, His Majesty likes to drink red wine, especially Lafite. I know this. Hellion Vivian chuckled softly, as if she was planning something. Actually, I almost had a conflict with His Highness. Hearing this, the Azure Dragon secretly glanced at his master and found that Beligaju was looking at him. He nodded his chin, which meant that the Azure Dragon should listen obediently. No wonder His Majesty was so cold today. It turned out that he had a quarrel with the princess. He should have thought of this long ago. No one could make His Majesty have such a clear feeling except for the princess. The Azure Dragon coughed softly. According to the hint given by Beligaju, he followed Hellion Vivian's words and said, So, what does the princess want to do? I want to get him drunk. Hellion Vivian lowered her voice and said very seriously, You should understand that in our modern world, under normal circumstances, the overbearing president will use this method to solve conflicts. The Azure Dragon, after coming to the modern world as an all-around special assistant, he watched a lot of TV series. But there was no female lead in TV series who was an overbearing president. Princess Consort, have you mixed up your own title? The Azure Dragon didn't know about this kind of thing. Hellion Vivian didn't get it mixed up in a day or two. So, do you have any good suggestions on how to get him drunk quickly? Hellion Vivian was definitely discussing this problem with the Azure Dragon very seriously. How can His Majesty? The Azure Dragon was still smiling. But when he saw the deep eyes of his master not far away, he immediately changed his tone and spoke twice as fast. Actually, it's very easy to get His Majesty drunk. Just mix the red wine with white wine and drink 3 glasses. He will definitely be drunk. Hellion Vivian's eyes lit up. Mix it with wine? Why didn't I think of this method? All right, the Azure Dragon, after this is done, I will give you a raise. The Azure Dragon felt that it was necessary to remind the princess. But His Majesty's demonic nature, don't worry. He has become smaller now, and his demonic nature is not as strong as before. It's still within my control. Hellion Vivian thought of His Highness's cute behavior in the past 2 days. She had hugged him in her arms and slept earlier. It was Yulao's words that made her unable to ignore it. Moreover, for 2 whole days, he didn't even touch her. Hellion Vivian clenched her fingers and ignored the dull pain rising in her chest. She had made up her mind to do this. At this moment, the Azure Dragon suddenly realized why His Majesty had turned into the form of a little devil. It turned out that he was digging a hole for the princess to jump into. The Azure Dragon didn't want to comment on his master's shamelessness anymore. However, the princess who came from Buddhism probably didn't know that the cuter a little devil was, the more dangerous it was. Because only the most perfect disguise was the most powerful moment of a devil. Hellion Vivian still didn't understand the situation. After all, whether it was Tian Dao or Buddhism, one would only shrink when one's magical power was lost. It was the same reason why she had become smaller. Therefore, she thought that Beligaju would be like her. She even asked Monkey to get her a pair of good handcuffs. They were made of special materials and were specially used to deal with devils. Boss, what do you want this for? Monkey thought that she had encountered some evil spirit that was difficult to deal with. Hellion Vivian was very straightforward. Isn't a little tight to handcuff His Highness? The rough men were speechless. Do they know something that they shouldn't know? She was indeed the boss. She could even think of such a way of playing. In other words, when the boss and Big Boss Jew were together, she was indeed the one who forced herself on Big Boss Jew. Helene Vivian lowered her head and fiddled with the handcuffs. She didn't realize that the people around her had already misunderstood. She was thinking about what she should do tonight. Chapter 1068. It was night, and the white roses emitted a faint fragrance. As soon as Helene Vivian turned on the TV, she saw the news of the murder case being solved and the heir of a certain corporation turning himself in. She held the remote control in her hand and sat cross-legged. The end of the remote control rested on her chin as she watched His Highness's tall back in the open kitchen. His Highness wasn't good at cooking, but he could still fry a steak. Of course, he noticed the gaze behind him. He turned around and saw that the person who was stealing glances at him immediately turned her eyes to the side. Bailey Jiaju's thin lips curved into a smile that wasn't a smile. Wearing a tight glove on his left hand, he gracefully lifted the tray and strolled in front of Wei Wei. Now, he was different from when he was outside. Two cute ears popped out from his silver hair. No matter how one looked at him, he looked harmless. Eat some steak first to fill your stomach. Beligaju knew how much a certain someone ate. He chuckled and added, I'll get them to come over later and make you a proper meal. Helene Vivian first put a mouthful of beef in her mouth, then puffed up her cheeks and shook her head. After eating the delicious beef, she said seriously, I can't eat that much. Oh. Bailey Jiaju raised the corner of his mouth, obviously not believing her. Actually, Helene Vivian didn't believe it herself. After all, her appetite was quite shocking. But now, her plan was to get His Highness drunk. How could she let others ruin her plans? Have you ever seen a woman bring her family along when she wants to sleep with a man? I've been on a diet recently. Helene Vivian said sternly. Don't you know? If you don't lose weight in June, you'll be sad in July. Besides, it's so late. They came over just to make me a meal. I'm very stressed, and my appetite hasn't been very good recently. Bailey Jiaju looked at the piece of steak that was quickly finished by her, and his smile grew wider. Huh, her appetite wasn't very good? Although Helene Vivian usually lied, she had never tried to cover it up like today. The main thing was that he was about to do something bad. When he thought about it carefully, he felt a little guilty. Helene Vivian cleared her throat guiltily. She didn't even dare to look at His Highness as she said to the air beside her, My head is tired from solving cases all day. I'm sure I'll have nightmares when I sleep. Why don't we have a drink? Beligaju smiled and his ears twitched. Want a drink? That's right, just a drink. Helene Vivian really wanted to reach out and rub that pair of ears. Her beautiful eyes were bright. Anyway, there's still a lot of time. Beligaju looked like he was in a dilemma. Okay, but you can only drink one cup. The last time he got drunk, it was really, don't worry, I won't get drunk this time. Helene Vivian was very confident about this. She wanted to get His Highness drunk, so how could she get drunk first? As a qualified demon deacon, Beligaju quickly curled his thin lips again. Then I'll go get a bottle of red wine. Okay, also get a bottle of Wuliangya. Helene Vivian didn't forget the secret that Azure Dragon told her. Beligaju's beautiful brows furrowed. Wuliangya? I want to mix it with wine today. Helene Vivian smiled gently, and the smell of a young girl came to him. You probably don't know, but when white wine and red wine are mixed together, the two tastes will collide with each other and produce a very wonderful smoothness. Of course, this was all made up by Helene Vivian. The most important thing about red wine was its mellowness. After using utensils to wake it up, the taste of the mouth would be better. How could it be like what she said, mixing Wuliangya? Beligaju stopped and smiled impeccably. Not a bad idea, but it's a pity that we don't seem to have white wine at home. I do. Helene Vivian happily took out a bottle of white wine from her backpack and smiled brightly. Erguo too. Although it's not as pure as Wuliangya, it's not bad. She was really a witty player. She guessed that there might not be white wine in the villa, so she bought a bottle at the convenience store before getting into the car. Seeing this, Beligaju raised his eyebrows and chuckled softly before saying, I'll go get a glass. Go. Helene Vivian suddenly felt that it was perfect. While a certain highness went out, she also checked the handcuffs that she had prepared to see if they were strong enough in her superb acting skills. Beligaju quickly came back with the things. The suit on his body didn't become disproportionate because of his shrinking. Instead, it reflected his youthful figure very carefully. The red wine was placed in a small silver bucket, giving a very luxurious feeling. The silver bucket was full of ice cubes used to ice the red wine. In this kind of weather, drinking dry red wine with a slightly cold taste couldn't be more enjoyable. Hellion Vivian reached out and took the wine glass that a certain highness had brought. After Beligaju's hands were free, he took a clean handkerchief with one hand and held the red wine bottle with one hand. He poured the wine into the wine glass with a standard posture. It was said that the temperature of the hand would affect the taste of the wine, so when pouring the wine, one had to be careful. As long as the wine glass was gently shaken, the rich fragrance of the red wine would spread out from the mouth of the glass. Hellion Vivian took a sip first, then reached out her white left hand and gently clinked the wine glass in Beligaju's hand. There was a crisp ding sound. Hellion Vivian took advantage of the time when a certain highness was still drinking to reach out her right hand and support herself behind him. The two of them were very close to each other. Hellion Vivian wanted to sneak up on a certain highness, but she didn't expect that the other party didn't look surprised at all. Although there was still a smile on his face, his eyes were a little indifferent. He just looked at her like he didn't want to touch her. He didn't reach out to hold her waist like he used to. This made Hellion Vivian's whole body stiffen, and then she withdrew her hand uninterestedly. Sure enough, he didn't have much interest in her after she had grown up. Or was it because he had already raised her, so he didn't find it fresh anymore? Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes and drank all the red wine in the glass in one gulp. Then she bit open the lid of the Erguo too and looked at Beligaju with a faint smile. "Do you want to drink it together?" "Okay." Beligaju put down the wine glass in his hand. There were too many profound meanings in his impeccable smile that Hellion Vivian couldn't understand. She didn't know that when she leaned over, Beligaju's eyes were terrifyingly deep. His gaze fell on the delicate collarbone that was exposed because she raised her hand, and there was an unprecedented magic in his deep eyes. In the beginning, when he saw this little phoenix, he was stunned. She was wearing the most boring, thick kasaya, and her stubborn expression wasn't very likable. Chapter 1069. At that time, it was still snowing in Mountain Tenya. She was holding a snowball in her hand and wrapped up like a pure and innocent little bear. She just looked at him like that. There was obvious stubbornness in her pair of beautiful black eyes, and it was also very childish. After looking at him, she stepped on strange patterns in the snow and didn't speak to anyone. Otherwise, she would step on the footprints with all her might. Although that feeling was cute, it just made people feel uncomfortable. He had always liked gentle things, but she was different. She always did things that gave people a headache, including constantly throwing buns at him. However, that pair of clear eyes made it difficult for him to ignore. Therefore, every time she appeared, she would always be able to attract his attention at the first moment. In the entire Buddhist path, only she dared to not read the scriptures and play with snowballs over there. He originally planned to just raise her. Back then, he went to Yu Lao's place and wrapped her with a red string. The purpose was only to make her eyes only look at him. He especially wanted her clear eyes to be tainted with pain. That was what made it interesting, wasn't it? But later, when he held her in his arms, he didn't know why, but he was actually so satisfied. It was as if as long as she lay in his arms, nothing was so important. Therefore, he tolerated some of the Buddhist path's provocations. More and more time, in his dreams, he no longer broke her hand, but pressed her hard on the bed and did some more excessive things. For example, kissing her hard, hugging her, making her happy and even crying expression appear on her face, making her hug him and beg for mercy. This kind of dream was like a vine that wrapped around the tip of his heart. The more it wrapped, the tighter it became, and the deeper he sank. The excuse of raising her was no longer valid. He thought that she wasn't that important. In fact, every time he heard that she went to water the Bodhi tree again, he couldn't wait to lock her up so that she couldn't go anywhere. Therefore, the feeling of not being able to touch her like now had already made Beligaju's tolerance to the extreme. Another drink? Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes and looked at him with a faint smile. Her voice was always pleasant after drinking, like a feather gently tickling the tip of one's heart. Her beautiful eyes had a layer of water vapor because of the alcohol. Her lips were slightly open, and her scattered hair hung down to cover her forehead. Her chestnut black hair seemed to have softened under the warm yellow light. Coupled with the lazy white shirt she was wearing, it only made people want to hug her fiercely. Beligaju's usually cold eyes gradually showed a trace of madness that had never appeared before. However, Hellion Vivian, who was determined to get him drunk, did not notice this. She only cared about whether the wine in his glass decreased or not. Azure Dragon had told her to drink 3 cups. As long as he drank 3 cups, a certain highness would collapse. Why hadn't he done anything yet? Beligaju swirled the goblet in his hand. Although his current form was smaller, his movements were still as elegant as before. When he was about to drink the second cup, he reached out his hand and gently supported his forehead with his slender fingers. He looked like he was about to get drunk. Hellion Vivian saw this situation and calmly took a sip of red wine. Do you feel uncomfortable? It's okay. The two of them were sitting on the sofa, and beside them was a large floor-to-ceiling window. Beligaju sat like this, and his posture became a little more languid. He slowly lowered his head and pressed his fingers on his temples again. His long and narrow eyes closed. His thick eyelashes cast a beautiful shadow on his face. Hellion Vivian's eyes lit up. She thought to herself that it was finally working. She smiled and began to pour a third cup of wine for a certain highness. Then, she realized that her overjoyed expression was too obvious. She instantly returned to a concerned tone. Since you're not feeling well, drink this cup and go to bed early. Hellion Vivian felt that what she did this time was perfect. After all, a certain highness listened to her and said okay to her with a chuckle. She didn't know that her cunning fox appearance had long been captured by Bailey Jiaju's eyes. The taste of red wine mixed with white wine was indeed very strong, especially when it was drunk in one gulp. Hellion Vivian smacked her lips and looked in Beligaju's direction. At first, she wasn't sure if a certain highness was drunk, until Beligaju stood up and swayed. He still had a perfect smile on his face, but his footsteps were a little unsteady. Hellion Vivian finally believed Azure Dragon's words. She stood up and pressed the man down on the soft sofa. Although the sofa was single, it was very big. Therefore, Hellion Vivian's actions didn't affect anything. She didn't give the man a chance to react. Then there was a click. Cold handcuffs locked his right hand and handcuffed him to the sofa. Beligaju didn't expect to use a prop like handcuffs. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Hellion Vivian with a deep gaze. What are you doing? Don't look at me like that. Hellion Wei Wei felt the need to defend herself. It's all because you've been too abnormal these past 2 days. That's why I'm doing this. At this point, she paused very seriously, then said, Don't worry, I'm not going to sleep with you. Beligaju had a smile on his face, but his eyes turned cold when he heard the last sentence. He thought that she was going through so much trouble to do something to him. This result was very different from what he had expected. It was still not enough. Just doing this was still not enough. Hellion Vivian also realized the coldness emanating from the man. Her guess had been confirmed. Her heart felt like it had been stung by something, and the pain was obvious. She pressed him down and gripped his wrist tightly, but her voice lowered. If you want to separate now, it's fine. Separate? Beligaju was shocked. He didn't expect her to say such a thing. Other than the anger of being offended, there was something else rolling in his eyes. What did you say? Hellion Vivian clenched the flesh on her palm. After so many years of being together, she even felt like she was connected to him by flesh and blood. She didn't want to separate, but there was no other way. Some things were ambiguous to begin with. I said, it's fine if you want to separate now. Hellion Vivian looked at him. I heard your conversation with you Lao that day. Actually, you already knew a way to make me grow up, but you never thought of telling me, right? Beligaju didn't deny it, and this silence made Hellion Vivian's heart sink. What you want more is a little phoenix that is completely raised by you. When you first approached me, this was what you were thinking, right? If that's the case, it's better to separate. Chapter 1070. Separate. Bailey Jia, Ju stared at her. His eyes were terrifyingly cold, mixed with a chill that made one's heart tremble. You should know that unless I die, the two of us cannot be separated. But what's the point of this? Hellion Vivian lowered her head. She didn't look at Beligaju. Instead, she stared at the black suit on his body. You must feel the same way in your heart. Beligaju clenched his fists and sneered. Feel what? It's better to separate. After all, it's been so long. There's no novelty anymore. Hellion Vivian's voice was very faint, but her eyes were unfocused. Beligaju really wanted to reach out and pinch her chin, directly kissing her mouth. That way, she wouldn't have to say these words that made him want to kill someone. But he couldn't touch her. That damned order was still there. Hellion Vivian's words were like a sharp knife, cutting off all the elegance he had in his life. No novelty anymore? Is this what you want to say to me? The low words seemed to be ground out from his lips, and every word was so forceful. Hellion Vivian didn't understand why. He was clearly the one who didn't touch her in the first place. So why did it seem like he was the one who was the angriest? Did he really think that she didn't have a temper? Of course, it's not just that. Hellion Vivian used all her strength and hugged him. Also, even if you don't like to see me, I'm going to hug you all night before letting you go. Otherwise, why do you think I spent so much effort to get you drunk? Beligaju paused. The dull pain in his heart disappeared without a trace as the person in his arms rushed into his arms. However, who said I don't like it? Where did this thought come from? Hellion Vivian was stunned, and her face was full of seriousness. Isn't that so? Yesterday and the day before, you avoided me like I was a bacterium. Moreover, your eyes were cold. Anyone would think that you didn't like to see me. If it weren't for the demon contract, you would have long been out of sight and out of mind. Most importantly, Elder, you had told her a lot of things that had happened in the past. In fact, Hellion Vivian knew very well that His Highness didn't like her at first. That was why he was so uneasy. After raising her, His Highness' obsession with her would fade. She knew Jia Ju too well. Once he lost interest, his first reaction would be to hate being touched. Hellion Vivian could sense it. I do intend to avoid you. The two of them were very close to each other. Beligaju pressed his lips against hers. When he opened his mouth, she could smell the fragrance of wine. That's because I was afraid that I couldn't help but do something bad to you. But you gave me that kind of order. Hellion Vivian's face was full of question marks. Order? The order for me not to touch you. Beligaju's voice was very deep, and his eyes were as deep as the night. He tilted his handsome face slightly, and his hot breath hit her ear inch by inch. Otherwise, my respected master, why do you think I didn't hug your waist and take you fiercely when you pounced on me? Hellion Vivian's body trembled sensitively. A numb feeling came from her ears, and her face was a little hot. She coughed softly. So that's how it is? She had long forgotten that she had given that kind of order. It was really embarrassing that she had made such a big mistake. Of course. Beligaju looked at her, and there was too much depth in his eyes. Hellion Vivian was straightforward. That's my fault. I'll take back the order. You can do whatever you want with it. That was what she wanted. Beligaju lowered his eyes, and his silver hair covered his expression. His hands with black gloves were placed on both sides of the sofa, and one of his hands was still handcuffed. His two soft ears were very harmless, and only the corners of his mouth were curled up in a mischievous smile. Hellion Vivian looked at him. It was really cute. She felt that since the misunderstanding was solved, it was not a big deal to lock a certain highness up like this. After all, a man who was not controlled was too dangerous. He would not let her hug him to sleep. This was the best situation. He was drunk, handcuffed, and his magic was weakened. No matter how she touched him, he would not resist. Hellion Vivian liked this setting very much. She leaned over and kissed him. Just lock me up. I can still hug you to sleep later. How do you plan to hug me to sleep? Beligaju raised his eyebrows playfully. Hellion Vivian reached out and pulled his ear. She felt that she had made the right decision today. It felt so good to the touch. Just hug me like this. Also, you don't have to struggle. With your current magic, you can't open these handcuffs. Oh, Beligaju smiled. It's so strong? Hellion Vivian was quite proud of this. I specially asked someone to make it with Xian Ice Iron. Xian Ice Iron specially used to subdue demons. Beligaju did not move. He looked down at the handcuffs on him, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. That's a good idea. Of course, who came up with the idea? Without guessing, Hellion Vivian was very happy. Her glassy eyes were like spring water, and she looked very cunning. But you handcuff me like this. Aren't you afraid that I'll be angry? Beligaju looked up at her. Half of his body was on the sofa, and his suit was wrinkled. It always gave a sense of beauty that was finally broken. Hellion Vivian kissed him again. Anyway, no matter how angry you are, it will be the next day. Now you can do something to me like this, right? Are you still dizzy? I'll go make some pear soup for you to drink first. I'll come back and hug you to sleep later. After saying that, Hellion Wei Wei stood up and walked into the kitchen with her long legs, humming a little tune in her mouth. She cut the snow pear, added honey, and prepared ice. After drinking wine in summer, it was always good to drink some pear soup. Beligaju looked at the busy figure in the kitchen with deep eyes. The smile on his face was evil and dangerous, which was in line with his current harmless appearance. The pear soup didn't take long to boil. After it was out of the pot, Hellion Vivian tasted it. It wasn't very sweet, so His Highness probably wouldn't hate it. Then she scooped it into a wine glass, added 3 ice cubes, and brought it to Beligaju. Hellion Vivian looked at the handcuffs on him. It's not convenient for you to drink by yourself. I'll hold it for you to drink. After drinking, we'll go to sleep. It seemed that she liked the fun of locking him up. Beligaju chuckled and drank a mouthful of pear soup. His obedient appearance made people's hearts itch. Hellion Vivian thought that she would be able to sleep with His Highness like this in a while, and her eyes were full of smugness. However, she soon realized a problem. Chapter 1071. Throughout the night, Hellion Vivian didn't know how many times he did it to her. In a daze, it seemed like it was almost dawn before he kissed her ankles and unlocked her handcuffs. Just like that, he carried her into the bathroom, and the shirt hanging on her body seemed to have lost its use of force. He had always been careful with her, as if she was a porcelain doll. Of course, other than in bed, when a certain highness was so fierce that it made people's legs go weak. Most of the time, when he looked at her, he was always so gentle that he didn't look like a demon who killed without spilling blood. The water was very comfortable on her body. Hellion Vivian didn't open her eyes and just moved. Bailey Jiaju lowered his head and glanced at her. He reached out his hand to cover her restless long legs and helped her massage her waist. Just like that, he gently hugged her with one hand and used the other to pour water for her. He smiled and kissed her spotlessly white forehead. After washing up, he took out a white towel and wrapped it around her. Then, he hugged Hellion Vivian again. He wanted to raise her. It had nothing to do with what form she was in. It was because she was her. However, those old men in the heavenly Tao were still as talkative as before. This was something that made him very unhappy. Beligaju narrowed his eyes. After placing Hellion Vivian on the bed, he called for one of his messengers. A black feather fluttered down. It was a letter written to Yulao. The content of the letter was very simple. It was only one sentence. If you still talk so much when you see Phoenix next time, I will beat your soul to pieces. The casual handwriting was just like its owner. It looked elegant, but in fact, it was overbearing. When Yulao received this letter, he was still picking through his pile of red strings. When he saw the demon's messenger appear, he began to have a very ominous premonition. When he saw the handwriting on the letter, he decided not to return to Yulao's temple for a while. He was afraid that some great demon would really come to beat him up. Just like that, Yulao's temple was empty that day. Compared to the speed at which Yulao tied strings for others, he was still very fast when it came to escaping. The night faded, and the morning light shone in through the window. Hellion Vivian was woken up by hunger. She smelled the smell of scrambled eggs with chopped green onions, which spread in the air and carried out a very wonderful fermentation. It was really very fragrant. Helene Vivian hugged the blanket and sat down. Before she was fully awake, she walked out. In the open and spacious kitchen, the man was cooking porridge. He was also holding a book in his hand. The book had a few big words written on it, 12 breakfast flavors. He probably sensed Helene Vivian walking over, so he turned the fire to the lowest setting before turning around to look at the person behind him. Helene Vivian's eyes were still closed. It was obvious that she hadn't slept enough. Her thick eyelashes cast a faint shadow, and she was as lazy as a cat. Looking at Helene Wei like this, Bailey Jia Ju's eyes softened. He walked toward her and carried her in his arms. His fingers gently stroked her hair and kissed the stray hairs on the top of her head. Sleep a little more? Other than Helene Vivian, His Highness had never been so patient with anyone. The demons hiding outside the villa finally heaved a sigh of relief. After all, they were very clear about their master's aura. Last night, when the Princess Consort said that they were going to separate, they were really afraid that their master would be unhappy and shatter them into powder. Then, he would destroy the villa with his bare hands. Fortunately, the Princess Consort and their master had reconciled. Not to mention the sense of danger, even the roses outside the villa were more colorful than usual. Helene Vivian sensed that someone was going to kiss her, but she didn't open her eyes. That pleasant smell was too familiar. She hugged the man's waist and said lazily, "I want to brush my teeth, but I don't want to move." It was obvious that she wanted a certain highness to help her brush her teeth. Bailey Jia Ju chuckled and carried her in his arms. The bathroom was very spacious. Helene Vivian was very obedient at this time. A certain highness threw her on the toilet lid. She sat on the toilet lid and kept yawning. Her two slender and fair legs were very beautiful, but her head was still drooping. She held a toothbrush in one hand and brushed her teeth unconsciously. The toothpaste on the toothbrush was squeezed by a certain highness for her. Originally, Beligaju just wanted to see how lazy this person could be. He didn't expect that she would sit there and not get up. There were even a few strands of hair on her head. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw that. In the end, Beligaju couldn't stand it anymore. He let her lean in his arms and fed her water to rinse her mouth. Helene Vivian cooperated. After brushing her teeth, she was awake. She smiled at a certain highness in the mirror and washed her face. "Let's go eat." His Highness let out a long sigh. He turned her face over with one hand and gently lifted her chin. After wiping off the water droplets on her face with a white towel, he said in a faint voice, "If it weren't for your good looks, I would have pressed your face down and made you wash it again. My respected master, the way you wash your face is not very beautiful. Don't care about these details." Helene Vivian leaned over and kissed Beligaju on her tiptoes. "Also, you're very good-looking." The demons, this was truly a narcissistic couple with no limits to their narcissism. But to be honest, Phoenix of Buddhism and Emperor of Heaven were famous for their looks. However, the former was too gorgeous and gave people the feeling that she wasn't a good person. As for the latter, even though he had become a demon now, he was still so handsome and noble that people couldn't take their eyes off him. Helene Wei felt that it was too hot, so she put on a white t-shirt and sports shorts and sat at the dining table. She even tied up her long hair and held the bowl in both hands. She opened her eyes wide and followed Bailey Jiaju's figure. Wherever he went, she would follow. She was just waiting for the meal to start. Beligaju had always liked the feeling of feeding Helene Vivian. Now that he saw her like this, he couldn't help but want to pull her into his arms. He did as he was told. He held the porcelain plate in one hand and pressed Helene Wei against his chest with the other. He said in a deep voice, "My master, do you know that it's easy for people to want to eat you when you're like this?" "Hey." Helene Vivian thought he wanted to do it again, so she warned lazily, "It's time to eat. I'm starving. You can't abuse me." Beligaju couldn't help but laugh and rubbed her head. Chinese food. There's steamed dumplings, chicken feet, pork ribs, and rice porridge. You should like them. Cantonese morning tea. Helene Vivian looked at the table full of small steamers and couldn't take it all. She was obviously very happy. Where did you learn how to make this? Chapter 1072. Beligaju's thin lips curled up as he picked up a piece of pork rib and put it into her mouth. I only made an egg with chopped green onions. The rest were all sent over by the hotel chef. Upon hearing this, Helly and Vivian fell silent. When ordinary people like them didn't know how to cook, they would at most order takeout. He was indeed an evil capitalist. Yesterday, she actually didn't see through his essence because of his cute appearance and was suppressed just like that. Thinking about it, it was really a little stupid. It was all Yulao's fault for pulling down her average IQ. However, today's breakfast was still very delicious. After Helly and Vivian finished eating the pork ribs, she specifically went to conquer the plate of fried eggs with chopped green onions that a certain highness had fried. The saltiness was just right, and it was very fragrant. Beligaju knew that the woman in his arms liked to eat Cantonese snacks the most. However, she hadn't touched the chicken feet and rice noodle rolls today. She had been eating the dishes that he made. Her stomach was bulging from eating, and she even asked if he had any. "I'll make it for you tomorrow." Beligaju rubbed Helly and Vivian's stomach for her. He used just the right amount of strength, and even he didn't notice the doting look in his eyes. However, he still had to settle the score. "My respected master, although we are together in life and death, if you dare to mention separation again in the future, I will definitely break your legs and break your claws." Beligaju said this sentence close to Helly and Vivian's ear. His voice was very deep and low, and it didn't seem like he was joking at all. Helly and Vivian also knew that she had misunderstood this time, but she asked, "Is it still useful for me to drink the divine water now?" She had to grow up eventually. "My master." Beligaju reached out and pulled Helly and Vivian's hand over. He lowered his eyes and kissed the back of her hand. "You are the phoenix of Buddhism. No matter in the past or now, you rely on your invincible merit, don't you?" When Helly and Vivian heard this, she smiled handsomely. "You're right. This way we can earn more money. Recently, my Taobao shop's rating has increased. If I take in another evil spirit, my merit will be complete. Later, I'll look at the comments and see if there are any orders I can accept." Just as Helly and Vivian finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. This villa was very big, and it was located in the middle of the forest. Under normal circumstances, no one would come here. The housekeeper would often come in, but only with Beligaju's permission. Helly and Vivian had never heard a doorbell like this since she moved into the villa. The villa was divided into 2 floors. The 2 of them were sitting in the living room downstairs, which was not far from the door. The person outside leaned against the wooden door and listened. When he saw that no one answered the door, he raised his hand and knocked a few more times. Strange, the address is clearly written here. The person held the envelope in his hand and looked at the villa in front of him that he had never entered before. He frowned in confusion. Did they all go out? They shouldn't be at work at this time, right? Such a big villa can't be without a servant, right? As he muttered, the wooden door in front of him opened. An extremely handsome face came into view. At that moment, he wondered if he had seen a big star. "Hello, this is your registered letter." The postman said loudly and handed the letter in his hand to the owner of the villa. Beligaju had been in modern times for so long, but he had never received a letter. This kind of thing that only appeared in ancient times, he did not expect to see it in the 21st century when information was so developed. "What's wrong?" Helly and Vivian held a steamed bun in her mouth and put her arm on Beligaju's shoulder. She looked at the registered letter in his hand and then frowned. After all, in such an era, very few people would use registered letters, unless there was a secret that they did not want others to know. Helly and Vivian took the registered letter and tore it from the side. There was only one piece of paper inside. The paper was completely black, and there was a line of words written in red script on it. "First of all, thank you for reading this letter. My master is very interested in the business you are doing. Recently, the house has not been peaceful, so I invite you gentlemen to come here for a gathering." In addition to this sentence, there was a string of addresses behind it. Helly and Vivian was very familiar with the address. It was one of the 8 alleys in the capital. It was very hidden and not many people knew about it. Helene Vivian raised her eyebrows and smiled playfully. Interesting. To be able to find them in such a way, it was obvious that the other party was not simple. The more complicated the person was, the higher the price. Helene Vivian liked this kind of person who did not lack money. After returning to the villa, Helene Vivian casually tidied up. She wore a simple black t-shirt and a pair of denim shorts. Outside, she wore a pure white sunscreen suit that was the same as Quan Jilong's. It hung straight to her knees, and she looked very handsome in it. Helene Vivian did not let Beligija drive. It was most convenient to ride a bike to such an old alley. Her long legs crossed over the BMW Tomahawk, and she let Beligiju sit behind the car. A certain highness liked this position very much. He reached out and hugged Helene Vivian's waist. It was not very far from the villa to the alley. The BMW Tomahawk was still very popular. Helene Vivian crossed the alley, and with a beautiful drift, she stopped the car in front of a wooden door with a stone lion. It was a very large courtyard house. It was built with ancient green bricks and dark sandalwood for the door. This kind of family was either rich or noble. To be able to live in such a big house in a place like the capital, not only did they have money, but they also had power. Therefore, Helene Vivian suspected that the person who invited them this time was very likely to be related to the military or officials. However, the current situation was a little strange, because outside the door, other than Helene Vivian and Beligiju, there seemed to be other people who were here for business. One of them was wearing a monk's robe. He did not have a beard and looked to be in his 40s. He had a string of prayer beads in his hand, and a group of people who looked like bodyguards followed behind him. Those who did not know better would think that they were here to fight. The other was a girl from Taipei. She looked very sweet, but she was wearing a black gauze dress and a black rose in her hair. She was in her 20s and was holding a crystal ball in her hand. It was said that she had the blood of a witch and could communicate with spirits. She had been on many variety shows and was very famous. Especially recently, she started a live broadcast on the internet. She only received one guest every week and told the fortune of that guest. Now she had become the most popular person in this circle. Those who believed in superstition and those who did not would watch her live broadcast on Tuesday night every week on time. There were two other people. One was a teenager who looked like he had just graduated from high school. There was no trace of emotion on his jade-like face. The other was a man in his 30s. He was calculating something with his fingers, looking very experienced. Chapter 1073. Hearing the sound of the BMW Tomahawk, everyone turned to look at Helene Vivian. The mysterious man put down his hand that was still calculating and curled his lips. Here comes another one. It turned out that everyone here had received the black invitation. Who on earth didn't even show up after calling us here? The man was obviously a little unhappy. He looked at the wooden door. This house is weird too. The rest of the people didn't say anything. Obviously, these people had met in the yin-yang circle, and no one was willing to give in to the other. Except for Helene Vivian, the man glanced at them again. "Miss, where are you from? Why haven't I seen you before?" "Self-taught." Helene Wei chuckled and replied to him. Then, she took a step forward. She had a basic understanding of the situation in front of her. Someone had led them to this courtyard house and asked them to meet first. This was to let them know that this business deal was still uncertain who would be handed over to them. When the man heard Helene Vivian's words, he laughed without hiding it. "Then you have to be careful. Don't cry when you meet a ghost." "I won't cry." Helene Vivian turned her head and smiled. "I'm afraid that you'll be the one crying when the time comes." The man didn't expect Helene Vivian to be so eloquent. He was looking for a soft persimmon to bully. He knew the rest of the people, and each of them was more famous than him. It wasn't easy for a small figure to come, but she didn't know how to appreciate his kindness. Helene Vivian couldn't see through his thoughts. She casually curved her thin lips. That kind of attitude was very infuriating. The man gritted his teeth and looked at her. He sneered. Juniors nowadays are becoming more and more disrespectful. They don't have much ability, but they have a lot of big words. "Master Zhang." The girl interrupted the man. Her eyes were like amber. What we need to do now is to find out who called us here, not to fight among ourselves. Master Zhang's attitude changed, and he laughed. Miss Leah is still the sensible one. But this door can't be pushed open. How are we going to enter? The girl held the crystal ball in her hand and frowned slightly. She also fell into deep thought. Hellion Vivian was never one to waste time by waiting. She glanced at Beligaju and strode towards the dark sandalwood door. This person is not only impolite, but also can't understand what others are saying. Master Zhang snorted. Hellion Vivian didn't have time to talk to him. She was always too lazy to be distracted when she was working. After she finished her work, she would tell Master Zhang how polite she was. He used a lot of strength in his hand, but the wooden door didn't move at all. Master Zhang looked at Hellion Vivian from behind and laughed disdainfully. The wooden door did not open, but there was a recording. Everyone, welcome to the 8th pawn shop. If you want to pawn something, please come inside. The monk also frowned. What the hell? This recording again. In other words, before she came, everyone would have such a recording when they pushed open the door. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and looked at the wooden door in front of her again. Since it couldn't be pushed open, it must be controlled by something else. Was it a mechanism? Hellion Vivian reached out and touched the wooden door. Master Zhang found a shady place to stay because it was too hot. From time to time, he would say a few words to the witch named Leah. After seeing Hellion Vivian's action, he twitched the corner of his mouth again. Here comes a crazy one. How worrying. Hellion Vivian didn't hear this sentence. Beligaju heard it. He looked back and slowly raised his hand with a black glove. With a faint smile, he made a shooting gesture in the direction of Master Zhang. Huh! The low laughter was the voice of a demon when he met the most disgusted human. However, Master Zhang didn't know. He just opened his mouth and said angrily, "Where did these two people come from? So arrogant." Umitba. The monk raised one hand. Don't argue with the juniors. I guess they don't have much ability. They just want to get a share. Master Zhang sneered. When something happens later, I want to see how they can act cool. Standing at the door and touching it. Is there something wrong with their brains? Forget it. Did you write the contact information on the letter? The monk lowered his eyes. It's more important to find out who called you and me first. Master Zhang and the monk usually didn't see eye to eye, but that was when they were competing. But now it was different. They were outsiders. They couldn't give such a lucrative business to the others. Other than this sentence, there's nothing else in the letter. The key is that the door isn't open. Is there anyone inside or not? Just as Master Zhang was complaining, Hellion Vivian locked her gaze on the string of red lanterns hanging on the wooden door. The lanterns looked like decorations, but there was no wick. Instead, there was a string hanging on one side. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes and pulled down the string. Gotcha! Master Zhang and the monk paused when they heard the sound. They looked at the wooden door that slowly opened in front of them, not knowing what had happened. Hellion Vivian tugged on the string and exerted force again. The wooden door opened completely. What appeared in front of everyone was a courtyard pawnshop with the characteristics of the Republic of China. Many Chinese roses were blooming inside. Everything was old-fashioned, and the path was paved with green bricks. Probably because it hadn't been inhabited for a long time, there was no sign of sunlight shining on it. It gave off a gloomy feeling. It was obvious that the wooden door could be opened because Hellion Vivian had found the correct method. The youth was the first to walk towards Hellion Vivian. He didn't say much, only 2 words. Smart. Master Zhang didn't think much of it. Wasn't it just a string? If they had seen it, they could have opened the door too. The few of them walked into the courtyard. The group of bodyguards, led by the monk, didn't follow them in. This was because the moment the monk stepped in, the wooden door behind them slammed shut. Master Zhang and the monk immediately turned around and pushed with both hands, but the wooden door didn't respond. How strange. He cursed heavily and turned back to look at the courtyard that had a strong Chinese flavor. He frowned. Unlike him, Wei Wei was very clear that this kind of mechanism had a time effect. Once the time was up, the wooden door would close once again. Unless they pulled the rope from the outside again, Otherwise, they simply wouldn't be able to get out. Chapter 1074. In fact, the courtyard they were in was not big, because it was a house within a house. Only by opening this house could they walk inside. Facing them was a room with the word pawn shop written on it. There was no one in the room, but as soon as they walked in, there would be voices again. I know what you want to pawn. Your contracts have been prepared and placed on the table. Please sign the contract and come to the counter to exchange. You will know everything you want to know. Helly and Vivian looked at the copper coins scattered on the wooden table. There was indeed a contract drawn on the table, but the thing pawned on the contract was their lives. Helly and Vivian, Jing Zifeng, Wu Fan, Leah, and Zhang Qichao. Except for a certain highness, everyone's name was written on the contract without any difference. The bloodstains seemed to indicate that they were about to lose their lives here. Master Zhang's face turned green. Who on earth is making such a boring joke? From the moment I received this registered letter, I felt that something was wrong. The monk looked around. The yin energy in this room is too strong. It's not good for anyone to stay here any longer. Why don't we think of a way to get out as soon as possible? It won't be so simple when it gets dark. Master Zhang immediately echoed. Master Wu Fan is right. There's something strange about this room. I can't sense any resentment, but it's very gloomy. It's better to leave as soon as possible. Did you forget that the door to enter is blocked? Jing Zifeng's tone did not match his age at all. It was cold. Master Zhang did not dare to provoke this young man. After all, he was the only one who saw him get out of the military vehicle. However, it was very strange. They all came on their own. Why was this young man sent here by a military vehicle? Master Zhang was full of questions, but he did not say anything. Leah, who was holding the crystal ball, closed her eyes. Her beautiful eyebrows furrowed as if she was in pain. Then, she opened her eyes and said weakly, "My sixth sense tells me that we have to sign this contract to have a chance." Miss Leah, you are really too amazing. Zhang Tianshi looked at her as if he was admiring her. Helly and Vivian chuckled, but did not say anything. Sixth sense? The recording had clearly told them that they had to sign a contract to know everything they knew. Was there a need to use his sixth sense? However, as long as it didn't affect her, Helly and Vivian wouldn't do anything that would ruin her reputation. Moreover, in the current situation, the person who sent the registered letter had aroused her curiosity to a great extent. She really wanted to know what had happened to make the person who sent the letter test them like this. But how we signed the contract? Zhang Tianshi seemed to believe in the words of the witch, Leah. His belief was mixed with a bit of a man's affection for a woman. After all, Leah's appearance was the favorite of most 30-year-old otakus. Most importantly, she was very fragile, making people want to protect her. Leah shook her head. I just used too much spiritual energy. I need to take a good rest. Maybe I can find a way. However, there is only one room with a counter on the other side. There is also no way to open the small door of the counter. Helly and Vivian tried it, and then raised her eyes to look at the contract drawn on the wooden table. If she followed this train of thought, then as long as she found a way to sign the contract, the wooden door would automatically open. Helly and Vivian walked to the wooden table again. Her eyes swept across the red mud at the side. She pressed her thumb on it and dipped it in red. Then, she pressed on the place where the contract was to be signed. There was a bang. The small door of the counter opened. Someone walked out from inside. He was wearing a military uniform with 1 bar and 2 stars. His rank was not low. Behind him were 2 soldiers. Masters, everything just now was just a small game. Please don't be angry. That person said. The invitation was sent to everyone by Old Master Song. Miss Leah, Master Zhang, and Master Wufan have met Old Master Song once. Old Master Song is highly respected and old. It's really inconvenient for him to come here, so I'll receive everyone. Everyone seemed to be listening to this person. Only His Highness, who really couldn't bear to see his pet dirty at all, was holding a white handkerchief and wiping the red mark on Helly and Vivian's hand with his eyes lowered. When that person saw this scene, he seemed to be stunned for a moment, but in the next second, he returned to normal. The car outside is ready. There will be special people guarding your transportation. The old master wants to meet you. The meaning was very simple. The meeting place was not here. Just as Helly and Vivian thought, someone was testing them. However, it was understandable. After all, it was the military. The military had always done things like this. They did not leak any information. There was truth in what was false, and there was truth in what was true. There were 3 military Hummers parked outside the courtyard. They all had very hard license plates. The soldiers guarding the cars walked over and saluted that person. Each of them was wearing a straight military uniform. There were women's and men's uniforms. It wasn't like the camouflage uniform seen on TV or in the army. Instead, it was the formal uniform worn by soldiers in a square formation. The aura of the Republic of China was very strong. These clothes need the masters to change into them, that person said politely. Sorry to trouble you. Anyone who was in the 2 professions of feng shui and yin and yang knew that in this world, the people who burned incense and worshipped Buddha the most were the officials, followed by those rich businessmen of all sizes. In today's society, it was no longer allowed to believe in these gods and Buddhas, so no official was willing to let others know that they believed in these things. Not to mention General Yuan Sun like Old Master Song. However, Master Zhang and the others couldn't understand. In the past, when Old Master Song saw them, they could tell that he didn't believe in them, let alone believe in ghosts in the world. Why was it different this time? He even asked them to wear military uniforms before meeting. It seemed that something had really happened, and he didn't want others to know. In less than a few minutes, everyone had changed their clothes. The moment Helly and Vivian came out, she saw a certain highness standing not far away. He was dressed in a military uniform and was dazzling. The sun shone on the military badge on his shoulder, emitting a faint glow. Black gloves were still wrapped around his slender fingers. The double-breasted coat was luxurious and perfect. He was looking at her. The way he looked at her easily reminded her of those warlords and major generals during the Republic of China. He was really handsome. Helly and Vivian's eyes lit up. Such a man was hers. No matter how she thought about it, it was a good deal. Yes, it was a good deal. Beligaju didn't understand what she was so proud of. He reached out and pulled her over in amusement. His fingertips brushed across her face lovingly. He raised his thick eyebrows and exuded a sense of abstinence. What is it? Chapter 1075. Oh, I got on when I was changing. Helly and Vivian also touched her face. Her hands itched to take a photo of His Highness, but after thinking about it carefully, she felt that it was better to be alone with His Highness like this. So she reached out and put her phone away. Beligaju had long noticed her actions, and his eyes darkened. There were some things that he seemed to have forgotten to do to her last night. But it didn't matter. He could make it up to her tomorrow night. Thinking of this, the corners of the man's mouth curled up into a smile. Helly and Vivian felt that the smile was a little naughty. Just as she was about to ask His Highness what he was smiling about, the few people over there came out. Jing Zifeng was undoubtedly the most outstanding person besides His Highness. That military uniform seemed to be tailor-made for him, and every inch of it was very fitting. As for the others, Wu Fan was a monk. It was not obvious when he was wearing a monk's robe, but when he was wearing a military uniform, his beer belly could be seen. Master Zhang's figure was not bad, but his temperament was a little pretentious. Even when he wore a military uniform, he looked a little like a traitor. After the few of them changed, they got into the car. They were blindfolded, and the man apologized to them again. Helly and Vivian did not object. Wearing the blindfold was just enough for her to sleep in the car. Beligaju could also see that she was sleepy. The two of them sat in the back, and he directly let Helly and Vivian lie down and use his legs as a pillow. His Highness was also wearing a blindfold, but this did not affect his ability to distinguish the dangers around him. His fingers casually stroked Helly and Vivian's hair. His side profile was so handsome that the driver couldn't help but look through the rearview mirror. Helly and Vivian only felt very comfortable. Like a cat, she nestled in Beligaju's arms. After the man noticed the movements of the person in his arms, The lines of his thin lips became much gentler. He bent down and kissed the top of her head. The quality of the military brothers was good. Otherwise, they would have gone berserk when they were shown such affection. The driver only coughed softly. Beligaju raised his eyebrows disapprovingly. He would still pamper her. The soldier felt like he had been attacked 10,000 times. He bit his lip and whispered to the person next to him, "Captain, when do you think I can find a girlfriend?" The captain thought to himself, "You ask me, but who should I ask? My girlfriend is still missing." However, he still couldn't show it on the surface. He only said 4 words in a very dignified manner: "Drive carefully." The scenery outside gradually darkened. The weather in June changed quickly. At first, it was just a little windy. When the car stopped, it was already raining heavily. Thunder continued to rumble in the sky, rumbling in their ears. That sound always gave people goosebumps. Celestial Master Zhang was the first to be let out of the car. As soon as he walked down, he was splashed all over by the water on the ground. Someone held an umbrella for him, but the rain was too heavy. The sound of the rain hitting the umbrella made people feel even more uncomfortable. Why did it start to rain? Moreover, did they take too long to leave? They had been driving for more than 2 hours. They were probably out of the capital and in Hebei. Celestial Master Zhang was also a scheming person, although he looked like he was counting the road along the way. "All right, everyone, you could take off your blindfolds now." The captain's voice sounded again, but this time it sounded muffled through the sound of the rain. Helene Vivian's blindfold was taken off by Beligaju. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw a flash in the sky and landed in the forest not far away. In an instant, countless black crows flew over her head, squeaking as if they were indicating something. There was a rule in the yin and yang world that it was not appropriate to use magic to catch ghosts during a thunderstorm. This sentence was not groundless. Anything that was unclean would become particularly ferocious on a rainy day. In addition, the black crows flying in the sky and the military villa built in the suburbs were not a good sign. Celestial Master Zhang's expression changed. Why does this look like a sign of a zombie coming back to life? As if in response to Celestial Master Zhang's words, another bolt of lightning flashed in the sky. Following that, there was a heart-wrenching scream. There was a panting in the scream. No one needed to guess. Everyone knew that it came from the villa. What was that just now? Leah immediately turned around and asked the captain who had brought them here. The captain's voice was very calm. "You'll know when you enter and see the old master." Celestial Master Zhang did not dare to enter, but with so many colleagues around, he could not run away. Moreover, he could offend anyone but Department Head Song. No matter how afraid he was, he could only brace himself and enter. The others all had their own thoughts as well. After all, that scream was too terrifying. It sounded especially scary on a rainy day. Fortunately, the villa was brightly lit. These lights seemed to dispel a lot of the yin energy. The interior decoration was very gentle and grand. In the middle of the hall, there was a large saber hanging horizontally. As for the other places, there were yellow talismans everywhere. There was also a wind chime hanging at the door. The first thing Helene Vivian saw was the wind chime. Whose idea was it to hang the wind chime here? Didn't they know that the wind chime gathered yin and attracted ghosts? "Department head, we've brought them here." Hearing this, the old man who had been sitting on the sofa turned his head. He was indeed old. Even his eyebrows were white, and there were age spots on his hands. However, this did not affect the military temperament that he had accumulated over the years. Especially when he looked at people, his eyes were very oppressive. "Take a seat. It's been hard on the masters to come in the rain." The old man smiled with a dragon-headed walking stick in his hand. He had the demeanor of a general. However, he had been in a high position for a long time. Even though his upbringing was very good, his words sounded like an order. Celestial Master Zhang knew how to flatter people. He immediately said, "It's not hard, it's not hard. Department Head Song, if there's anything, you can just tell us." When I received the registered letter, I was still a little puzzled. I thought it was a prank. The registered letter was written by my granddaughter. I didn't know about it at first. The old man's voice sank. Many days ago, She started saying that the house was haunted. I didn't believe her. In order to ask for help, she could only write a registered letter and send it to you. It's just that the people who came before all had accidents during the process of catching ghosts. It's not good for such things to spread, so I brought her here. But even so, once night fell, she would become especially scared. She said that there are masters of exorcism who can do it. But this time, to prevent accidents from happening again, she wrote down all the masters she thought they were in a registered letter. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.